All right, we should be live. We should be live. I haven't figured out the fancy intro thing yet, although I know I can do that. Uh, Folks, we are talking about the Odyssey again. This time we have video mode, and I'm pirating Streamyards to do it. So don't tell Streamyards. But this conversation keeps going. It has become a wildfire on your timeline and mine. And honestly, I wouldn't keep talking about it if the conversation didn't keep getting more and more interesting. So I'm here talking with my good friend Twitless about the Odyssey, about Nolan's work, about the Homeric epic, and about cinema theory in general. How are you doing tonight, Twitless?
I'm doing well. I just came off of seeing it in IMAX TM.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think it may not be true IMAX. I heard that it's when it says that it's IMAX, it may not be a true IMAX. IMAX Light, however you want to call it. It was a very full frame, is what I'll say.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. the The main thing I've seen, just to play with that a bit, like the main thing I've seen is the dimensions have been the main thing people have talked about. Is it the dimension, like the full frame? Well, I suppose when you say full frame, your experience was probably that it took up your entire peripheral vision, right? Like that's
So
really
it's
what they go for.
I mean, in the I think IMAX Light kind of
Hmm.
arena, it's just what you get is you get a certain percentage on a top or bottom. Whereas in the more traditional showings, you're gonna get cut essentially. You have that uh, black on top and bottom. You're not gonna see the full image essentially. Basically, the shots of the ocean, for example, are gonna be way bigger. So the ocean's going to look way larger, and the overall screen geography is going to be way bigger. This has some
Hmm.
interesting. I would love to get into that more to talk about some of the consequences that has for this as a aesthetic product. But it's also the sound's extremely loud. I don't know if that's particular to IMAX. It was blowing me away, which also added to the overall effect. Um, but how do you want to start talking about this? There's so many angles of attack on it, and I will say that just right before I saw it today, and I was even I saw a couple like clips and reviews of what other YouTubers are doing, and
Hmm.
I'll be honest, I'm really disappointed in some people that I think are way smarter
Mm.
than that, stooping
Hmm.
to just missing the entire point of what's being done. Not to say that we have to agree with everything that's being done. I don't know if I want to spoil my review, but what I
Mm.
will say, and I'm curious to obviously hear your thoughts. But when people ask about this movie, is it a good film or not? I I feel like I'm Xavier Renegade Angel, where I go, it doesn't help to be reductive. Where it's just like this experience is interesting to me because it broadens our view of what we consider to be, um, or it asks us to interrogate what we mean by good film. Are we saying this is a good movie, a good piece of cinema? And I want to get into defining that a bit. Is this a good adaptation? And on each of those points, I think you can make it's nuanced. There isn't just a
Mm.
flat binary. Yes, this is a good movie. No, this isn't. Or it's more complicated to talk about. So I walking out of the theater. I was a mixture of things. I would say that in a binary sense, if we're gonna bring in the binary, I was a mixture of love and hate. But what I was loving and what I was hating weren't always on the same point. And so I was like I said,
Oh, that's fun.
I was a mixture, a discombobulation of things, and it was very interesting to sort that out.
So,
So that is
in other words, like, are you saying sometimes you liked a cinematic moment, but you thought it was a poor adaptation moment, that sort of
that's
thing?
that's where it got really interesting to think about, to parse, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that mean if I am um I the film of overall is a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And so like my pulse was pounding. And part of that was just the sound being loud, but that sound was part of the effect. And I was just like, gripping my seat with tension. And so obviously that part was functioning. But as it's functioning, I'm watching something that's clearly not um in some cases I was like, liking or disliking the adaptation aspect of it, while it, enjoying the roller coaster ride. So like I said,
Mm.
inter- analyzing this film is I think requires an advanced set of critical thinking, not a simplistic one. And what I've seen, unfortunately, in some of
Mm.
the discourse about this movie has been just really oversimplifying things to an embarrassing level.
Mm.
I'll bring up one. So let's talk
Please.
DEI for a second.
Yeah.
So there's been it was Matt Walsh actually, and Matt Walsh said something like, "Oh well, they're doing the DEI thing because they cast Black Helen of Troy," and I was like, "Okay, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's actually, if you count the math of what's actually being done in the casting of this film, most of it you would technically have to say is being whitewashed. Okay, if we're going to use the identity uh, rubric to judge this film, most of the Greeks have all been white cast. Okay, so in terms of like white representation in this movie, it's overwhelmingly in the white. Matt Damon is Odysseus, you know. Uh, Anne Hathaway is Penelope, and Tom Holland is Telemachus. Like all of the main characters are white. So the fact that there's like a black person in it, but that's what violates the, you know what I mean? Like it's just like the numbers don't quite work out if you're going to count the diversity thing. Either according to that calculus, everyone should have been just white. But it's a play about Greeks, so everyone was supposed to be Greek then. But now we're doing the identity thing, so it's just such a mess to just judge the film based purely on that metric. So that's one of the areas that I will just point out that reveal the fact that judging this film based on an overly simplified metric is going to, I think, just be a silly endeavor. It's not that those aspects aren't there and they don't play some role and that there isn't something to critique. It's just that I'm seeing people just literally react to one thing in the movie and then ignore everything else and then just like bounce to their favorite conclusion. And that's a little, I think, unfortunate. So there's definitely some things to parse out here.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one note on and folks, if you caught the first review that premiered today with Nick and myself, Nick Freerillian and myself, we're going to be talking about entirely new topics with this conversation because there's enough to chat about with this film and the discourse around it for a completely fresh take. So you're going to hear entirely new stuff for myself. And one of the things I did not talk about with Nick that I've been anxious to talk about with Twitless here is Helen of Troy. And if I found it to be an interesting missed opportunity. I don't even necessarily agree with the criticism of the casting of Helen because I think that actress is beautiful, but the the way in which we find her is
Yeah,
post-war, and she is not meant to be beautiful.
she's been
That's the
uglified.
point.
She's been scarred.
Yeah,
She's been, yeah.
which fits very tastefully with the theme of the fall of Troy being a significant tragedy. It's an end of an age, and the discovery over the course of the story is that the invaders are not outside the walls in a way. The invaders are inside. The Greeks are destroying themselves, and that age of bronze, maybe with a little heavy-handed language, just to make sure everyone in the audience was paying attention. That age of bronze is ending, and the Greeks are ending it themselves, and that's the tragedy that Nolan wanted to explore. I think, which I think is interesting. So if you didn't find Helen of Troy beautiful, that fits that fits with the theme of the story as Nolan wanted to describe it. I think.
I've got a quibble there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Please.
it plays into what you're saying, which
Yeah.
is this actually a story about the Greeks? Because I would put to you that it isn't,
Well,
and
no. Yeah.
yeah.
It's about
So
us. Yeah.
no, yeah. So this is when I see when Menelaus turns her face and says, "That's the face that launched 1,000 ships," and he's being ironic about it.
Hmm.
It's very clear what the message there is, which is this chick wasn't worth it. Which, broadly speaking, when you look at this story as what I would call this, as people have called this as Nolan's The Odyssey, this is literally America, The Odyssey. And it's very much channeling. There were some specific moments where it was just so patently obvious what this was referencing in terms
Yeah.
of an America that has basically been on its own Trojan War in the Middle East for over 20 years.
There you
And
go.
to turn the cheek and say, this wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth it, boys. And I've
Yeah.
literally talked to you and I and anyone you could talk to have talked to a veteran. Some who, like, and they're not all like this. Okay, so I'm not going to be unilateral here. There are some veterans who still very much believe in the mission that we conducted. I'm not going to go too far in naysay that, but there are Menelaus. There are Menelaus veterans who turn that cheek and say it wasn't worth the boys. So that is who he is meant to represent, and the fact that he is speaking in an American vernacular, in an American register, and pointing at the American project in the Middle East essentially, and saying "one worth it," is very
Yep.
much meant to resonate with an American audience. Because this is a story ultimately of American empire. It's empire, I think, broadly, and it's using the Greek Empire to talk about that. But this is about the American Empire, and that's why it's very Roman coded. And that's where, like, people who just focused on um like they saw the giants in the forest, and they said, "Oh, look, that armor doesn't look accurate." And it's like, first off, it's giant armor. What is accurate period giant armor for magical creatures? Secondly, the point isn't that he's not trying to be accurate to Greece. He's trying to do something else. And I also wanted to point
Yeah.
out,
He's trying to scare us, the audience. He's not trying to scare a Greek audience from 1100 BC. He's trying to frighten us with the Lystrogonians.
well, yeah, the one thing I want to point out is this. So one part of the discourse here, which is I think very interesting, has to do with that very fact of the production, and it's the concept of authenticity as it applies to Hollywood. If
Mm-hmm.
this film were made by Chinese and they just recast the Odyssey and put it in, Chinese actors in China and whatever, no one bats an eye. If Russians do it, no one bats an eye. But for some reason, if Hollywood does it, everyone says you have to you have to be historically accurate. Like, the historical accurate people show up because there is an expectation that's placed upon America and Hollywood that you have to do something that is there is a standard of authenticity that is placed upon Hollywood that is not necessarily placed upon other cultures. I find that to
Hollywood
be,
has Hollywood has a global responsibility.
yeah,
Even the critics, which we often are of Hollywood, still buy in that Hollywood has a responsibility that Bollywood or Shanghai or St. Petersburg does not. Absolutely.
that is exactly what I was what I was kind of picking up on, is the fact that there are these expectations and they are completely different. But like I said, if you set a story in Greece and it's from Hollywood, people go, "Where are the Greeks at?" No one says Greece has to make this movie, which they easily could. Like, you could just say, "Well, hey, Greece, make your own
I'd love
Odyssey
that. It would
film."
be so cool.
I
Yeah.
love it. No, I'm saying go ahead, make that film. I'll totally watch
Yeah.
it. But Hollywood, but here's the thing: Nolan's version is a product of Hollywood, and he fully embraces that. This is a Hollywood production for Americans, and this reveals some really fascinating things about what are expectations are regarding a production of this kind versus what the reality is. As you well know, we don't know a ton definitively about Homer. And on what we do know, which is really interesting, reveals a couple of interesting things. First off, is the fact that Homer, there's some research that was done, and there's a debate about how much this of the Odyssey of Homer's work may have been written in addition to being oral. But even considering just the oral tradition, there was some research that was done, and when they observed the closest thing to Homer, you bards who basically did this type of oral performance, and they recognized or realized that the bards had a framework
Mm-hmm.
and that they did a lot of improvisation. And so they were constantly changing and maybe adding things or detract. It was kind of like a play. When you go and see a play, each play's production of that play is going to be a little different. And the oral performance had certain repetitions, certain formats. You had to hit these points, and obviously, like overall, I'm sure the story was largely the same, but it was being improvised. It was being changed as it went. So there's that.
Mm.
Secondly, every single version of the Odyssey, unless you are a ancient Greek scholar, unless you're Emily Wilson or Fagles, which is the one I read, unless you're one of those two who has a full command of the Greek idiom, you are reading a localized work. This is the anime conversation all over again, which is you are
Yeah.
getting something that is translated. So there's already a layer of this is something else. Okay. And when you compare all the different versions of, just the opening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Odysseus a man of twists and turns? Is he a complex man, which is
Yeah.
Wilson's version?
Complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Give
Complicated,
me,
I
yeah,
think she
give me a
says,
complicated
which
man.
is
Yeah.
even worse. Yeah.
Is he a what was it? A man who can was it contend? Was the man who can contend?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like it is.
Yeah.
So each of these is its own rendition, and so whatever we get. So when people say, "Oh, that's not authentic to Homer," and it's like, well, that already is a huge conversation
Yeah.
because there isn't just an authoritative Homer we found in a box somewhere, and then and you did it right or wrong. The
Well,
work
and
itself was always kind of being improvised, and every version we've ever gotten has been somebody's localization of it. And so I think that what that allows us to do is to bring land that plane. What this allows us to do is it allows us to give a little more rope, I think, to Nolan, because this is Nolan's localization. We like it or dislike it, but to say, because there are people who are
that's
like
good.
there are people who are saying he desecrated it, right? And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, just calm, like let's lower the temperature just a little bit because this is not it's not the same thing as the Bible. This is not the same thing as other types of works that are we have a much more definitive version. This was part of a tradition that had a lot more leeway in what you could do when they were orally performing it, and then like I said, every version we've ever gotten has been a take on it. That's the thing. Every version of the Odyssey is a take. This is Nolan through Hollywood. This is American late stage empire take on the Odyssey. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it is very appropriate to the moment that America is in because of that, which is another
Yeah.
fascinating thing that I think makes this film interesting to think about, even as I sorted through my feelings of things I liked and hated.
And acquaintance of both of ours, Cale Zeldin,
Hmm.
mentioned in his review, and he teaches Homer, he teaches Iliad and Odyssey every year to high school students, for
Hmm.
I think over 15 years, and he made the important observation that even Homer is an adaptation. If you think that there's any historicity at all to the tale, maybe we don't call it a localization, but but why not? Like it is a perspective from a particular creative force or a collection of creative forces that are brought together, you know, from a very particular perspective to capture something that was already there, that was already being told and was already in the
Hmm.
zeitgeist and was already that the culture was already conversant in, and it had to be composed and shaped into something that could be brought into a narrative framework, you know, intelligently. So even Homer is doing that. So like, to be authentic, you could be authentic to Homer, for instance, and not be authentic to late Bronze Age, uh, you know, uh, ancient Greece, pre-classical Greece, you know, and that's a challenge that I think a lot of people who are not familiar. I think a lot of people are drinking from a fire hose right now about what what critical studies, and I don't just mean like woke studies or something, but like what classical studies has been conversing about with the Homeric epics for hundreds of years now. You know, or even what the Romans. By gosh, like just today, I was reminding myself of what the classical Greeks 600 years later were saying about the Homeric epics, and how they're like, this is just an analogy for natural forces. It's a narrative vehicle. Like Plato has, Socrates just say, listen, like the plot, you can dispense with the plot. The thing is just, he's basically a pre-Socratic Homer, and he's just letting you know that everything is in motion. Uh, that's the point of the Odyssey, to let you know that nothing is static, and that's a philosophical principle that he wanted to convey. Before the age of philosophy, he felt he could convey that in epic poetry. That's the sort of stuff people were working with 2,500 years ago
Hmm.
to wrestle with it, which would shock us today. But and today, I think it is a challenge to work with something that I think a lot of people in the West have a firm understanding that this is a foundational work to the Western canon,
Hmm.
but they haven't, they're less aware with how that work, and it's true that it is, but they they haven't been conversant in, like, I'm really not trying to pull, I'm not trying to rug pull people's impressions of this film, but if, like, they don't know that Dante put Odysseus in hell, you know, they don't know how this work has been
Yeah, the Romans
so
don't.
seminal.
One of the reasons, one of the things one of the takes here, it reveals how Roman coded America is in some ways.
Yeah,
But the Greeks celebrated how devious and deceptive Odysseus was, and the Romans didn't care for that.
yeah,
To them, Troy is a tragedy. To the
yeah,
Greeks, it's a triumph. These are
mm,
separate ideas, and
yeah,
Nolan leans into the Roman, because Nolan is leaning into the tragedy the tragedy aspect, the PTSD, as it were, which
mm,
isn't quite as heavy as I think some people online are talking about, but it's there. But the sort of the regret is definitely there. The empire reaches a point where it can only regret its decisions, and it can only kind of like fancifully remember back when a time was simpler. But the very fact that Odysseus has to twang his bow in this film to give his prey a fighting chance, because that is the honorable thing to do, is not the
yeah,
Greek The Greek way is, they said they were proud of how clever, how machination prone Odysseus can be. That's a celebrated aspect of him. It's why he is the trickster, cool figure. And like I said,
yeah,
that doesn't play so well in Rome. So like this is a much more uh, Greek myth through Roman coded lens, far removed, obviously. But to me, seeing them in the Roman helmets uh, tracks just because of that. Like I said, this
yeah.
is a this
Well,
and
like, to think of just a simple parallel, just to add and underscore what you're saying. I mean, we just finished the World Cup, hosting that in North America,
mhm.
and how often do we have this conversation in America about how we don't like soccer because we don't like how tricksterish a lot of players are with the referees.
Oh
You
gosh,
know,
yeah, we hate
we hate
that.
that. So we should appreciate. It should be abundantly. This was an opportunity to embrace the Homeric epic through the lens I shouldn't say the Homeric epic. We should embrace the Trojan War through the lens of uh, another aspect of the ancient classical world, the Roman world, which is much more in line with our temperament. Like that would be a very interesting. I think it would be a fascinating and fruitful opportunity for us to think of the Trojan War as a tragedy. But somehow it could get back to your notions of cinema, um, and what our expectations are of film in particular. That we actually pride ourselves in Hollywood being uh, the seat of escapism, and we get upset when, and maybe rightfully so, when Hollywood falls short of delivering on escapism. And I think like a lot of the counter posts I've seen, interestingly enough, like usually just done through like AI video, like people are trying to add color to the Odyssey. They're trying to make it exotic. They're trying to make it exciting and titillating.
That's not the
All that's
point.
fine,
It's not the
but it's
point.
not the point. It's
It's
not
so
the
far from
point.
the it's so far from the point. And
Yeah.
that's not me saying, oh, don't you dare make an adventure film that's based on the
No,
Odyssey,
absolutely
because
not. Yeah.
like the Odyssey. First off,
Uh
okay,
oh. There you go.
the Odyssey is a list of Airbnb reviews.
Wow. Okay.
The Odyssey is a travel log where you basically review the, hey, stayed at this place, host left out towels for us, left out some food, good place, 5 stars, would stay here again. Went over here, she treated us like pigs. This person here, dangerous neighborhood. My car got broken into. Like, as if you look at and again, I'm not just joking here, because if you look at how much time is actually spent, where the time and language is spent in the Odyssey, like 60 to 70% of it is the Airbnb review part. The
Hmm.
actual, like, oh, I fought a monster is like that much. It's cool. It's great. There is adventure here. I'm not saying there isn't, but the amount of time you get spent with, I went into the king's hall. The king said, "Who are you? Who's your father? Where do you come from? What do you want? Here is some food." Then, you pay your due deference to the king, and then you have a feast, and then the morning after you talk business, then he sends you on your way with a gift. Like, this is like a large amount of what the Odyssey actually is. And this is where the Odyssey actually reveals itself to be epic in nature. And this is like, this work really helped me process what an epic is, because this isn't just a work that has because a romance has like monsters and fantastical elements in it. What makes this an epic is the fact that all of these elements that are fantastical or adventuresome, they are used to reinforce, as Horace says, to teach and to delight, to instruct and delight. And this book teaches us about the concept of xenia, which is hospitality. And it teaches us from multiple angles. And it basically shows you how to be Greek. An
Hmm.
epic is going to, through a piece of fiction, through a piece of art, it's going to deliver fantastic art, and it's also going to be culturally instructive. And so, without just giving a sort of Veggie Tales moral, which does not simple morals here, but it gives complex analysis of what it means to host, to be hosted,
Hmm.
and the consequences and limitations of both, which are core aspects, at least from what Homer shows us, of being Greek. Because the whole thing is the fact that, from my understanding, Zeus's law, which is very much played with in the film, but taken in a very different direction. But Zeus's law is the fact that, which also very interesting overlap with Christianity, direct reference to people who have tended angels unawares. The idea is the fact that when you treat beggars as if Zeus could be in disguise. And like I said, this is something we see in the Bible, but the idea is the fact that you treat the beggar or the person seeking supplication, hospitality very well, because of, it's like God could come in disguise. However, this is not just a simple, like I said, VeggieTales moral of be nice to people. because this work shows you what a being a good host looks like, what being a bad host looks like, what being a good guest and what being a bad guest look like. And I think that's one of the
Mm,
reasons why you get so much time spent with Telemachus, because without
mm,
Telemachus, you would not see what being a bad guest looks like in such detail. Because this isn't a story that just says go and be nice to people. It shows you what being a Greek means in terms of both accepting and being generous with hospitality. And that's what most of the poem spends its time talking about. There is no there's, like I said, there's no, we can't argue that. If you actually just count the lines, how many lines do they spend fighting the Cyclops? A couple hundred maybe. How much time do they spend going through the exact same format of how to approach the host, what to say to the host, and then how that plays out in those dynamics in terms of like good and bad? And you're given so many models of how it looks when it's properly done, and even the sort of, like I said, the limitations when you get to the Phaeacians, which unfortunately were cut from the film. um, which I definitely want to talk more about Xenia, because how Nolan
mm,
uses Xenia is completely different, because he cuts all of a certain aspect out, which completely reframes the story.
mm.
But that's what the Odyssey really is to me. So, like I said, my joke hot take is that if I were to make a modern rendition, I would make it a list of Airbnb reviews, because that is kind of what it ends up being.
Yeah, yeah. With the reviews that the Airbnb host gets to do about you,
Exactly.
whether or not
Yeah,
you
both
trash the
ways. Yeah.
place
Yeah,
or
exactly. He
something.
trashed my
Yeah,
place and ate all my food. Exactly.
yeah.
It's the Airbnb from both sides.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Yeah, I can rock with that. It and which is why, like, because I've got folks have been in my comments today talking about comparing this work to the Aeneid. There's been a lot of conversation about the Aeneid, which is super exciting, but I don't really think it's a 1-to-1 on almost any level, because the Aeneid is like, it's a foundation myth, but it was very much understood. It showed up late in the game. It showed up after the end of the Republic.
It's a
It's
retcon, isn't it? It's basically like we want to.
yes,
It's the Romans saying we want to like borrow some Greek legitimacy. So we were
yeah,
at Troy. It was basically we was kings, but it's the Roman version.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, we was Trojans, and
Yeah.
and they do it in a way. I mean, it's set 400 years before, like Aeneas is 400 years before Romulus and Remus, so it doesn't actually bump against the challenging, inherited, genuinely ancient origin stories that the Romans already had to wrestle with, and was properly canon in a much more real sense. It's on. That's what's on their coin. Aeneas is not on their coins. Romulus and Remus is. So and it's Augustus basically paying for a really nice, his own version of a Homeric epic to celebrate his coronation. It's great. They loved it, but it's not something that they had to wrestle with the way even the classical Greeks had to wrestle with a culture that, like, it's a surviving capsule, like a time capsule from a culture that had already died and was lost. and a much later culture, the classical Greek world, inherits this and then has to figure out what they want to do with it. And typical Greek fashion, they just find a way to basically, you could equate them, I don't know, maybe to the deconstructionists or the progressives, or I don't know, like they invent critical studies to basically say if there's any value to it, it's analogies for scientific topics or philosophical. But it's the Romans who, once again, Romans weren't famous for philosophy or science or inventing new modes of that, but they were able to say, no, we've got actually a compelling way to discuss this, because we like what Sophocles was doing, and we like what Aeschylus was doing. by playing with Agamemnon and saying, well, maybe Agamemnon killed his own daughter to ensure a victory,
Hmm.
and maybe that cost. I mean, that's the biggest cost you can pay to ensure victory. Clearly, like even in that, even in classical Greece, they're thinking, well, you just set the state. You just ensured that this story is going to be a tragedy. This is not going
And
to be
that's the
one of,
version. That's
yeah,
the version we get in the film. That's because that's not in
yeah,
Homer's work. Yeah, that's definitely something that they're.
yeah.
And the whole Sinon is not in it at all. That's all. So
And
this is a
that's
mixture of
part of
things.
that tragic development where they're saying, where the Romans are saying, well, we're going to take and run with the tragic components that the Greeks partially explored, but the Greeks were primarily not interested in exploring the tragic or comedic elements of it. That they were doing that in the plays, but the core of the foundation, it being a foundational work to the Greeks, in my understanding, not being an authority, it was foundational to the classical Greeks because they were interested in talking about timeless truths that they could glean from it, philosophical or otherwise. It they were also telling plays, generally tragedies, with it, but that was not what made it central to their culture. It became central to successive cultures who decided that they wanted to do we was Trojan.
We was Trojans. Oh, you muted yourself. I think you bumped your mic. Anyway, I'll fill the dead air
I'm back.
while
I'm back, right? No? Still no?
funny part, funny story. I think Matt was exactly talking about this very exact thing about bumping the mic. So
There we go. There we go. Am I back?
okay, yep, you're back.
Yeah. Yeah, well, starting with the Romans, and then many successive cultures afterwards said, no, the central way we're going to play with this is because it's going to tell us things about, on a very human level, about the human capacity, human limitations, and human character flaws generally. That's
Hmm.
how we're going to explore that. Interestingly, that's in the opening. I mean, it's in the opening paragraph of Homer, that the story is going to be about a man who really wants to get home and he really wants to get his men home, and the gods are not going to allow. They're going to allow him to get home, and they're going to pluck every single one of his compadres out of his hand, and that's what the story's going to be. So it is a pathos driven story, but the classical world was, the Greeks were not interested in until the Romans decided, no, this is how we're going to continue forward with it, and then cue the Enlightenment, cue the Renaissance, cue all these different successive cultures who are going to very strongly identify, cue America at its founding, uh, to identify with this narratively in a way, that I think is enormously respectful. In some ways, more respectful to the Homeric core than the classical Greeks were, in my view. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, what do you think?
I was not aware about the because I that in the film they make a big point about Agamemnon um, sacrificing his daughter. And so I was like, that's definitely not in the Odyssey. So I did not know that was a. You said that was a Sophoclean edition.
It's Aeschylus
Yes, okay.
who does it. But Sophocles has Ajax, and Ajax plays with the cruelty of Agamemnon as well, and really fleshes that out. He picks out stuff that, um, yeah, and turns him into a Darth Vader figure, and then Aeschylus plays with the terrible cost.
So I love the Darth Vader thing because that plays into the Batman armor they put Agamemnon in this one, which is another thing
Yeah,
because people are like, oh, he's got Batman armor, and I'm like, yeah, like so. Here's my thing. One of the things that irritated so much about one of the things that's irritated me so much about the discourse around this film is
yeah,
that you have someone who's Nolan, right? This isn't. I don't even mean to Uwe Boll, but like this isn't like Ed Wood. This isn't someone who is utterly incapable of doing historical accuracy. this is a take. These are choices. So like if he's choosing to dress up Agamemnon in a armor that looks like Batman, what is our reaction shouldn't only just be um that he didn't get the history part right.
Yeah.
Like that's like to me that's kind of baby brained. That's the smooth brained reaction. The reaction is to go, oh, he deliberately chose this fantastical armor. He's the only character dressed that way.
Yeah.
What are we
Can we
doing
ask
there?
why?
Yeah, can we? Yeah,
Yeah.
can we ask why? And like, it's very clear that Agamemnon, he doesn't talk through most of the film. The way he stands, he is a presence.
Yeah. He's
It's
a
very
force.
clear
Yeah.
whether again you can like it, dislike it, that's fine. You can say this didn't work for me, that's fine. You can have whatever reaction you want, but it's very clear that the film through Nolan is trying to make Agamemnon a force and a symbol, and even using that sort of like superhero armor, which I think makes ties in with this broader theme of the fact that this is America's Odyssey. America
Hmm.
was the world's first superpower. Okay, you know, from that, superhero tradition, the Superman, the superpower, we see ourselves, or we have often seen ourselves in an international context as acting like Superman, as Superman does in the recent Superman film, intervening
This is
like
good.
Superman to dive into a foreign country and say, I'm going to show you what's what and do what's right and use my superpowers to do so because I am special. And
Yeah.
to
This
see
is
a
this is
sort of
why Twitless is here, by the way, guys. This is really big stuff. That you can't get this anywhere else. Please continue.
so to see Agamemnon portrayed this way is a deliberate choice, and it's meant to evoke some of these ideas. And it plays with how Nolan is, I think, using myth in some ways, and almost the paradoxical way he's utilizing myth, because this is a film that both propagates myth and also tries to subvert and subdue it at the same time. And that creates a bit of, like I said, it creates a bit of a confusion, a bit of a paradox. It might be a weakness of the film, but it's interesting to see what is being attempted. And this also ties in with the cinematic aspect. One of the most mythic things this film does is be an IMAX film you need to experience as that roller coaster ride. I want to
Hmm.
dive a little bit into what I mean by film versus movie.
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
so uh, Matt Walsh mentioned this. It made me cringe. He talked about seeing a
Hmm.
film on, or seeing a movie on a cell phone and getting basically the exact same experience. He was talking about Memento, but he said, "Oh,
Wow.
it's dialogue driven. You can get the same experience on a phone." And I was like, "The ghost of David Lynch is rising up." Are you familiar with David Lynch on watching movies on iPhone or smartphones?
No.
There's a funny clip because David Lynch was a very known artiste director, Twin
Hmm.
Peaks, lovely guy. And he's the kind of guy who really like believes in cinema. And if you want to see some very intelligent people who can also be super pretentious, talk to some film scholars. They're the ones who we get most comic book scholarship. It kind of like is downstream of film scholarship, and I did a smattering of that in grad school. We read a little bit of what was called Cinema 2 by Jacques Deleuze. I'm not butchering that pronunciation. It is dense as hell. It is some of the most difficult stuff to wrangle. It is like French structuralism out the wazoo, philosophy plus the philosophy of the image, which even has overlap with like iconicity and all this. It's just really dense stuff. But what you get when you boil all this down, if I can try to boil some of this down in my very plebeian understanding, is the fact that many people process movies as just stories on a screen.
Yeah.
And the only difference is the medium being delivered.
Hmm.
And cinephiles are people who really dive into the unique experience you get when you sit in a theater and you're seeing. They even talk about the concept of projection as being very important, taking
Hmm.
something that's small and through an apparatus making it big in a public space, and that being a cinematic experience. And that having something very, because again, like the human face that you're seeing on an IMAX screen is 20 times larger than your face is. And your processing of that story is going to have some impact if you can fully embrace what's happening with that. And the fact that Nolan is trying to make a larger than life story by deliberately choosing IMAX and deliberately filming in IMAX and deliberately going through his own personal odyssey to basically build an apparatus that will specifically muffle the sound on an IMAX camera that are naturally too loud, very loud machines, to then produce this very large and loud experience for you to go through is itself, I think, a little bit a part of the artistic experience. And so there is a larger than life aspect to seeing this in IMAX. Some people have just said, oh, you just get a little bit of 20% sky and a little 20% below. Um, you know, Big deal. But that's a perspective that just sees these as movies as opposed to cinema experiences. And that may sound a bit frou-frou, and maybe it is. So I'm not going to deny that. But I will say that to fully embrace what Nolan is attempting to do, I think this film should be experienced the way David Lynch would want you to experience it as the director intended on a big screen. Because as David Lynch, try to tie this back to David Lynch was like, you think you saw a movie when you saw it on your effing iPhone and you didn't see it. David Lynch is
Hmm.
like, if you saw my movie on your iPhone, you didn't see the movie.
Hmm.
And so that's where I would like to kind of like posit this difference between movie and cinema, right? Or do we just see movies to watch stories on a screen, or are we part of a larger image-based experience that's meant to do something? And like I said, cinema scholars really dive into the all of the nuance of that. That's why they some of the French New Wave people will make movies that are like anti-movies, where it's like
Yeah.
there's no story here at all. I'm just gonna have you experience ennui on screen because I put something on the screen for 9 hours. Ha ha ha! It's an artistic statement.
Hmm.
Obviously, some of that stuff goes way too far, and I'm not gonna enjoy it. But what it shows is that we don't always have to think of film in the exact same way that we think of this just a story that happened on the book or a story that happened in a picture. That these are different the different media. I mentioned Postman. The media is not just the message, the media is the mind, kind of an idea.
Hmm.
A very different kind of experience. And so that what Nolan may be attempting to do with this film um, is embrace a sense of myth through filmmaking, just the art of filmmaking, and making a large picture and making it big in places. And I remember when I was watching it, I tried to key into that. And so when they're walking up the steps to the Cyclops' cave, I'm like, he's framing this shot, and I'm seeing this in IMAX, and it's like I'm there on this roller
Hmm.
coaster ride with Odysseus, and my heart's pounding because I know it's coming, but I'm walking into the mouth of that cave, and because the screen was so freaking big and the noise was so freaking loud, and I'll talk about sound for just a second. People have really criticized Nolan for his sound mixing, but
Yes.
there was one moment where it worked for me very very strongly because I'm in this huge scene and they're on the boat and the waves are crashing and Odysseus says something and I missed it. And I realized I was like, because I felt like I was in the boat with the crew, it felt really authentic to miss something that somebody said
Yeah.
because I was on the roller coaster ride. And because I
Is
was on
is
the
that a
roller
difference between movies and cinema, that you would be okay with missing dialogue moments like that? If like, can you garble? Can the mixing, can the score overwhelm you in a way that increases the experience and dissolves your clarity of the narrative at
it,
times? I
it
think you might be
did
onto something there. Yeah.
it did in a couple moments.
Mm.
I think that's one of those experimental techniques that like hit or miss. A lot of people just go, I missed a line. I paid for this. I'm pissed. But like when I was on that, like I said, on the boat, a couple of times, and like I said, I missed a line or two. I was like, oh wow, this is what it would be like if I were sitting on the boat with Odysseus. I wouldn't hear every single thing they said. The waves are crashing, the storm is going, and I'm hearing crash. It felt there's an authenticity to the experience of that, and that is getting closer to the cinematic kind of thing that cinema scholars will really go ooh, because that's a different type of authenticity, right? You're reaching something different. It's not just because like the more objective critics will go, this was a story, you were supposed to deliver the lines and the dialogue and the beats, and you missed one there. That's a fault. I'm going to count it against you. But if you're thinking about it with the roller coaster ride mentality, and like I said, I really every summer they call it summer movie season, and people line up to be part of some of those roller coasters. I think that's why cinema still should exist, because otherwise, if it's just a story delivery method, just get it on your phone. But again,
Hmm.
that's what David Lynch is getting at. You're not actually watching what I wanted you to experience, because I'm not just putting stories on a screen. I am crafting something. I'm crafting cinema. And not every person who makes a movie is crafting cinema, and that's okay. I don't want to come across as too elitist here. There's plenty of room to just, sit in front of a screen, get a story to a screen to you. That's fine. But Nolan strikes me as the type of director who is trying to do something different. And because he's doing that, it does feel a bit larger than life, which means it feels a little mythic, which means that through the art of filmmaking alone, he can communicate aspects of myth, even if he's not doing all the fantasy bits the exact same way you might expect. And that was fascinating to me because I knew he was going to do something like that, because Nolan always plays with mythic things, but tries to
Hmm.
get at them from a different angle. And again, it's hit or miss, doesn't always work, but it's always interesting to see what he's going to try. Because he does Batman, the whole Batman Begins series, it's the same thing. He's taking mythic ideas, but he's using camera tricks. There's like prestige kind of going on in here, like when he did the Prestige. He's playing
Yeah.
games with illusions, to kind of like, again, trick you with camera stuff to get you to experience something from a slightly different angle, to get you
Hmm.
experience a larger than life thing and not only rely on the size of the giants.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got me wondering. There was a moment of anxiety, I have to confess, when I was in the theater and I realized that I wasn't gonna I didn't have subtitles turned on. And I know, I mean, everybody's seen the news articles, you know, backed by research now, that increasingly people just leave subtitles on because they're used to experiencing storytelling in the middle of multitasking, hanging out on their couch, scrolling on their phone, and uh,
Yep.
occasionally looking up. And they need, in order to catch the delivery lines, we've decided to reinforce the dialogue by having it in text as well as in audio, and also because of poor mixing and all these kind of reasons. There's many reasons why people are just leaving the subtitles on, even when they can't explain why they need it on. And it makes me wonder, like, um as 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 movie theaters, as Hollywood struggles to figure out how to do what it once did, and a lot of the safe assumptions about what brings people to theaters for $300 million plus, the bottoms are dropping out of those expectations, and we're getting, we've had 10 years now of safe bet turned into a crash, a disaster at one after the other. It could be just the fact that there is no subtitles on English speaking cinemas for North American
Oh,
audiences.
yeah.
Even that codes the theater experience for cinema now in a
Mm.
way, like, where someone like Nolan will capitalize on um, the bottom dropping out of rival expectations on what a movie could be. Maybe he's just the one of the last men standing now to say, well, nobody's picking up. I found this crown in the gutter, and and I'm gonna pick it up and put it on my head. Of what um the
I
the
don't I
the,
don't want to
the
over.
crown of like of telling stories for theaters
Yeah,
specifically, not so that you can live stream it, not so it can be on Netflix, not so it can
yeah.
be a TV series, but so that you can see it on IMAX no less, and not just because it's a big screen or a square screen, but because I want to completely encapsulate your entire field of vision, including your full periphery,
So,
and
yeah.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to score it. That actually helps explain. Nick and I were talking about, because we both saw it in conventional theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and we're used to Hans Zimmer, who basically destroyed the the John Williams era.
Whoa.
Yeah, by just like doing tonal stuff that he could score on computers, and you could just cut tracks digitally, and then you could later, if you even wanted to, you could get a symphony to back it. But he could just cut it at the end of every film shoot. But 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 it was Nolan. Uh, that was like a business decision, I think, from Zimmer's perspective. He's brilliant in his own way, but it's Nolan who saw the brilliance of that Zimmer approach, and I think he's finding ways to allow, even, I mean, this wasn't scored by Zimmer, but it was Zimmer-esque. We're in the age, we're just, everybody's downstream of Zimmer now, Hans Zimmer, where uh we're just doing tonal little moments, but it was pulled back more than even most Nolan movies are, and it's probably because it was shot for IMAX. It's the first of its kind apparently to be shot for IMAX, which means it's probably the first time any of us have ever seen a movie that's been scored with the intention that you see it on IMAX, which means it's going to be more minimal than we're used to hearing, even from a tonally scored film, which is pretty minimal.
Mm-hmm.
so so I think that's just to your point. It
But
probably played really well when you were sitting in IMAX today.
all that we said, I think IMAX light. I think it's maybe not true IMAX, but definitely bigger than
Mm,
normal. The one thing I will add to this, or kind of land one of the planes here, is that I think
mm,
this is a good a very enjoyable, like it was worth the $15 for the matinee I paid to go on this roller coaster ride.
mm.
I think it's a good piece of cinema. I think it will end up being a terrible movie. If we talk about the difference between cinema and movie there,
Oh, fun.
if you just
Okay.
when you just bring this home and slap it on an iPhone, I think it's gonna suck.
Wow.
But if you get to see it, so if you're gonna see this movie, go see it on an IMAX screen while it's in theaters. It's the summer movie, and this is the moment to experience this, because it's an experience and it's a fun experience. It's worth, I think, your money to experience it. But I think when people start buying this sucker on DVD or Blu-ray, I don't think, like, just thinking about it, I don't particularly, I think, want to rewatch it on DVD. I'm like, I want to go take my wife to see it in the movie theater, experience this roller coaster live when it's projected on a gigantic screen, and it's so loud at times where you feel lost in the sea with Odysseus.
Mm,
Those roller coaster rides where it's like, it's like a narrative roller coaster, and you were like, there's like a screen, and you're like, I'm actually in a TIE fight or on X-wing, and I'm doing the Death Star run, that kind of thing. And
yeah.
it creates a different kind of illusion, and it's enjoyable even if the story isn't the tightest one. I think that's a one way to think about this. It's a ride,
Mm.
and it's
IMAX
more than
as
that.
a ride. Yeah. Mm.
It's more than that, but one way to, I think, access this film, the way I think close to what Nolan may be intending, is to think of it that way. Because there are people who just aren't clicking with that, and they're just like, why am I paying more money for just 30% more screen? It's just the same story, and it's like, well, that's a different philosophy of what you're getting and what you're paying for. Um,
Yeah. Can
as a
can
as
I
a
can
as a
I
Yeah,
can I help with that just a bit more?
sure, sure.
Um, yeah, there's an ongoing conversation, and we've discussed this before. A lot of people have, of the growing invisibility of the screen, where it's just this, like, it's a view from nowhere that has no particular perspective. It's not really a medium anymore. It's just a portal into reality, you know? So I'm it that invisibility, I mean, not only does it mean that we're losing our attentiveness to film as an art form, we're just seeing it, as I don't know. It's just like it's plugged directly into our imagination, so we don't have a way to filter it aesthetically now. So we just don't care. We literally do not care if you're getting 30% more at the top or the bottom,
And that's, by
because
the way, that's
we
fine.
don't know.
Yeah.
We can't see different screens, and like we don't even know. We don't see the screen anymore, so we don't understand the value of a different type of screen, I guess is what I'm trying to
When
say.
you can put like I have friends who have like the meta glasses, when the whole world's a screen, like nothing is, you know what I mean? Like I get that, and that might
Yeah.
be just part of the cinephiles are moaning about, losing this appreciation as a dying art form, as many are, and that's fine.
Mm.
And I'm not, if someone says, I'm not paying 30% for, I'm not paying 20 10 5 10 more dollars for that extra percentage of screen, if that's, I completely understand that
Yeah.
angle. The thing that I think is interesting is the fact that Nolan is using this structural production based approach to
Mm.
reinforce a sense of the mythic. And that to me is interesting. Whether or not it works, whether or not it works, your mileage will vary. But the fact that
Yeah.
a director is attempting to do that, and he did this, like I said, in Batman Begins, he did these camera tricks to make Bane seem larger than life, even though he was technically shorter than Christian Bale. And there you get an
Yeah.
interesting idea of like how a character can be larger than life through presence, through voice, through all of these things, as opposed to
Mm.
just being 8 feet tall. So I know that Nolan can play these games. I know he can work the camera, work the scene, work these elements to try and reinforce an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this is what he's doing with Agamemnon. He's choosing these things to
Mm-hmm.
reinforce an idea that pertains to a larger than life or mythic kind of concept. And the choices that he makes throughout this film, whether or not they work, are at least intellectually interesting to examine. And ultimately, what he does is to use all of them to reinforce an American Odyssey. Uh, to tell a story about a flagging American empire that may be looking not towards its better years, but towards the enemy, the sea people, the enemies at the gate, barbarians you've let into the house, guests, unwelcome guests who are devouring, like, however, whatever political metaphor you want to attach there.
Yeah. Who may just be us, who have, in a deteriorated state, in a state that has taken for granted the virtues that got us here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Regardless, it's like negative things are coming. The the uh, but the story, like I said, is very much an American myth about who we are, and that's why when people go, "Oh, why are they talking that way?" They're talking American vernacular English, and that revealed some fascinating things, because I saw some EFAP guys like Mahler and crew, and they were just
Oh
like
yeah.
they couldn't articulate why. They're just like, "Well, it should be British people, right? They should be speaking the Queen's English," and I'm like,
Yeah. That's how you
there's
code something being old world
but
from
it
an American
revealed
perspective. Yeah.
but they were uncomfortable with saying it because they knew they had no basis for it. It was purely an expectation they had, because some
Yep.
of them were British, and some of them were just used to hearing Brits, and there was no, because again, it's like, this is a work from Greeks. Isn't there a moment where there's a moment early on where when they're doing their first early raids, and I think they're talking, the guy who actually speaks Greek, and they have to translate him, which is
The only
very
person who speaks a different language, and
uh
he's speaking Greek to a
and
bunch
again,
of
it's like,
Americans.
it's very clear because Nolan deliberately chose that
Yeah.
to highlight the fact that he's doing something different.
Why are
So
we
that
acting like that's a accident? Yeah.
it's not, you're not, yeah,
You're
that wasn't like
supposed to live with attention. He has an Indian American say we're Greeks.
yeah.
That's intentional. If you feel
To
that there's a
agree.
tension
Yeah.
there, yeah, to a Greek. If you feel that there's a tension there, that's intentional.
And the farce of that, I think,
Hmm.
is more of a commentary on, again, what we are as Americans, this mixture of paradoxes, and traipsing about on our own, like I said, Middle Eastern project that has, like, so, you really can, I think, it's not a big stretch, and I think Nolan is cognizant of this, that we basically had our own Trojan War in the Middle East for, so it's the war on terror, right? We've
Yeah.
had, yeah, that's what that is, right? It's our
What did Troy look like? It was just a bunch of dressed sandstone. Like, have you seen like the palace of uh well, not Osama bin Laden, but yeah, like
Saddam
have you
Hussein.
seen like what, yeah, like Saddam Hussein. Like that's the vibe I got.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't pick up. That's
Even
interesting. No, yeah.
the the and that's something I mean the sparseness, the barrenness of the sea and the islands and even Troy itself was an intentional decision, and that lent itself to feeling like
You said a desert, right? You said the
the yeah the
desertification of the ocean.
yeah I think that just lends even more strength to your perception that this is about uh the American empire in living memory, you know, and the sins that we have to wrestle with in living memory.
There's a point where the empire can like do nothing but regret. And that's
Hmm.
because it's just the empire just reaches a point of just, it just regrets. And that's where we're at. My part of my point is, this is the same thing with the Superman film as well. Because some people had some, negative reactions to aspects of that, and it's like, well, why isn't Superman, or why aren't the Greeks just kicking butt and taking names like it's the 1980s? And it's like, well, it's not the 1980s. We've been at war with the Middle East for 20 something years, and you can talk to veterans on the street and get a mixture of responses, and some of them would be like, yeah, we shouldn't have gone over there. And like, you're just, as the Greeks came back at different times, and some of them are still over there and lost, and some of them are here and you can talk to them, like, it's, you get this
Yeah.
mixture of things, and one of them says, yeah, Helena Troy wasn't worth it. Like, we have to contend now with a very complex set of emotions, regarding the what we've done as an empire. Our It's not just purely pride. We can't just take pride in it all. Some people, Nolan's project is far more mournful, far more focused on the negative aspect of it. But it's hard to say, would the film have resonated at all if it had just been the Empire's doing fine, and we're just sacking Troy, and it's all great. Like, it's like we've
Yeah.
seen, even recently, even in wars that people will argue are justified, how many bodies are stacked. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at some of the conflicts that are happening right now, across the globe, that we
Yeah.
are involved in, every day we get to, we could look up and see, oh, we did this maneuver, and here were the consequences for it. That
Yeah.
the cold
Americans
waiting.
back home, the Western world, uh, is traumatized by the wars of America, even without having participated in it personally, just because of our news feeds.
Yeah,
To your
so
point.
I don't, not to over politicize that, but to just say that it's complicated. And so I
Yeah.
think that, not to lend credence to Wilson's translation, but at least if we're going to say that this is an American Odysseus, then it should be a complicated man.
Hmm.
Because this is, we I know, but we live in complicated times. It's
Yeah.
harder. It's hard to just take a unilateral stance on things now that we see the costs of it all. And this film draws a very red line on it.
Hmm.
That basically leads to the main Hitchcock slash Shyamalan twist of the movie. Do you,
Yep.
is it okay? We're at this stage. I think I can do the
No,
big
please.
spoiler.
Yeah. I've got a big one too I want to do, but you go
Okay.
first.
The big spoiler is that Athena isn't there, which is, like I said, the people who I saw who just went, they were talking about, well, Athena is cast as Zendaya, and I was just like, did you watch the movie? Like, did you watch
Okay,
any of this? She's not
that
in the movie.
that's
Athena's
the
not
one.
there.
Athena's the one I wanted to talk about. So this is great.
Okay.
I want to hear. I want to hear your take on Athena.
The gods are a presence. They
Uh huh.
for the film is framed. It's very deliberate. There's a frame tale at the very beginning, which is, like I said, very interesting. The frame tale is not the beginning where the rapper starts singing. That part was cringe. There's no way I can defend that. That part was
Yeah,
just
he's not an
cringe.
actor. It was
Yeah,
not
that
great.
was cringe. But it's mercifully short, and you can
Yeah.
ignore it. But the film actually starts with a narrative text. It says, in a time of apparent magic. Nolan has to like step in front of the camera for a second and kind of like complicate the mystery here. So he's already trying to like plant some seeds of that, like what you're seeing isn't there's some complexity here.
Yeah.
The thunder kind of imparts that Zeus might be around. The ocean is very clearly Poseidon. The gods are kind of there, but they're all presences. They're forces, as you might mention, as you mentioned earlier. And it's very clear to me that Athena is the representation of Odysseus's conscience, and perhaps, if you want to go more Greek with it, his psyche. As a goddess of wisdom, she's basically a projection of man's wisdom. As an actual person who lives and breathes, the film does not really reinforce that. It much more strongly reinforces her as simply a projection of his conscience and guilt. And that the thing that really sells this is the minute that he fully reconciles with that, with his conversation with Penelope, she vanishes. She's not there. She is a thing in her head. And if she's real, it's because she is a representation of Psyche, which, as goddess of wisdom, that would be the most analogical thing that we would construct. Whereas Zeus is like nature, Poseidon is nature, Athena's more relatable because she's human nature, taking form that Odysseus can talk to, but it's just him. It's him the whole time. And the reason why she has the face of Zendaya is because he's contending the whole film with his guilt of the sack of Troy and the woman that he saw get beheaded when the statue of Athena was beheaded. It's like people miss this. And I'm
Okay,
like,
so
this is
you
like,
saw that too? Are you the?
yeah,
I think you and I were the only people who noticed that.
I don't, I people, I don't want to be
No,
mean.
no
Some people have
commentators are bringing this up.
some people have this is where I have to say this is the most judgmental I will be. Some people have forgotten what watching movies is supposed to be, because
Yeah.
these are the things that Hitchcock and
No,
company used to
that's
do
that's the view
every
from nowhere. That's not understanding that film is art and it's a medium. Yeah.
I don't want to be mean. I don't, but there are some people who are being a little bit thick, and not
Yeah.
seeing the fact that we had a cinema language, and that this was very very clear cinema trans like as
May
early
I
as,
I'm gonna try and test.
oh, you lost you lost your song there.
I'm gonna try and actually bring up a pirated shot of
Oh,
that
we're gonna do.
particular
Oh gosh, you're gonna
scene that
struck
I
live.
found on Twitter, and I want to make sure that the audio still works when I switch over.
Okay.
So you tell me if you stop, and you guys in the chat, now you can see my Twitter feed, or you can tell me if you don't hear me anymore.
Are you gonna get struck?
I don't know. Maybe.
Because we're live, you gotta be careful with that. You can maybe
Yeah.
I would maybe show you can maybe show like a still image. I would just be careful, because if you show like any audio, it's like, content ID is gonna kick in. And
Guys, do you see this is playing in loop?
you're not sharing screen, by the way. So if you were trying to share screen, I don't
Not
see you share.
not with yourself. Let me
Oh yeah, because you okay, because you're doing
yeah,
something
because
remotely,
we're
right? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm being a trickster, and let me I don't even can you see this if I no, YouTube
All right.
doesn't
I will pull it up
support.
on my other monitor.
Yeah, you might if you just scroll my feed for a moment. Guys, can you see this? Tell me in the chat if you can see this, cuz I see it on my feed. We'll see if we
All right.
get struck. This is
Someone's
play a
saying
good
my
loop.
volume's a little low. I'm gonna try to sit next to close to the mic. I just now saw chat. People have been chatting this whole time. I didn't see. Oh
Yeah,
gosh,
guys
there's a
can
whole
see this.
conversation.
Yeah. So that's clearly that that girl was cast to look like Zendaya a few years younger. Yeah, Free Willy,
Chat
it
is saying
says,
they see it. Okay, I'm sorry. I've been seeing. Now I see chat now. Okay, so I'm gonna
no, yeah,
engage
I
more with
don't.
chat now that I see them.
We're being a little, yeah, I haven't been great about that. But it was Rillian who brought up that he connected it, Agamemnon, not knowing uh, the Aeschylus tragedy. He identified the girl that, and I'm scrolling up, guys, now, so you can see. Um, the the daughter of Agamemnon that was sacrificed also looks very similar.
Yeah. No,
So I
that's fair.
I want to suggest as a tripartite. Um, there's a light skinned girl who is being echoed in two moments, but principally, I'm gonna go with what Twitless is saying. I'm gonna say principally with the sack of Troy, but secondarily also with the sins of Agamemnon. That those bookend the tragedy of the Trojan War. The beginning, the to start the Trojan War, a girl that looks like Zendaya has to be killed, and we see that. There's only three light skinned black girls in this entire movie, and it's Agamemnon's daughter. It's this girl who's slain at the exact same moment that the statue of Athena is beheaded, and Zendaya herself. So that's really to your point. You're actually bringing something that I didn't. I was just thinking of Athena being the only goddess, the only deity that we see because she's choosing to embody the sins of the war and reflect that to Odysseus. So I was still thinking kind of supernaturally. But
I don't.
I like
I
what
don't.
you're doing with that and psychologizing it. That's probably more true to what Nolan's intent was.
Because the thing that really sells it. Bernard says, as probably the only brown person in this chat, let me hit you with this. The girls look nothing alike. So there's your.
Oh, dang it! I all three of them. All three of them? Are you
I
sure?
think there might be.
Okay.
I think there might be something to that
Well,
potentially,
thanks,
but
Bernard.
that's fair. But the thing that really sells this to me is he's talking to Penelope. He sees Athena while he's recounting this whole scene. He reaches out. He makes physical contact, air quotes, and then the minute that he finally kind of
Yeah. Well,
finishes.
he acknowledges, he admits and repents of his sin
Yeah,
of essentially being the sea people that he's heard about, that his wife has been fearing was going to destroy, the world as they knew it. He was like, yeah, actually, me and my crew destroyed
we broke. He
the
says
world.
we
Yeah.
broke the world. But the minute he
Yeah.
says that, it's not that she vanishes like an illusion. She's just not there. Like she's
Yeah.
never been there. And his hands, I believe his hand's still out. And it's like
No, you're right.
she's a projection of his mind. But I think that's interesting because Athena is associated with wisdom, and that could be associated with psyche. And this is just the Greeks' understanding of that psychological angle is interesting to me, whereas Zeus and
Mm-hmm.
Poseidon are more elemental. And so there's that interpretation that Nolan is using
I like that.
is interesting. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that, but it's so obvious through the very clear cinematic cues that anybody can pick up. This is stuff that we were doing with we did this stuff with again with M. Night Shyamalan, I See Dead People. The twist that the
Yeah.
person you see isn't there. That's not a super
Yeah. Well, Calypso,
like
Calypso is, if you want to be authentic to the tale, Calypso is semi divine, I believe, and
She's
she
not.
makes the
She's yeah,
right, like
yeah.
she's
No,
not
yeah.
mere human, and she says, "Who are you talking to?" Do you remember that moment? Uh, I mean,
Oh,
that's a
okay.
clear signal.
Well,
When
and
he's having a moment of reflection, uh, you could just pass through that and say, well, the deity was visiting, but um, but why signal that once again that if it wasn't obvious that nobody in this story, and there are a lot of gods and goddesses allegedly in this story, but nobody knows that Athena's there except Odysseus, including characters that are more than human.
well, okay.
So
Let me air quote that because
okay,
the version of Calypso we get is also not divine. Like there's dialogue there that says she isn't. Um,
okay,
because
really,
she's like I could make you. She says like you could live here forever. He says, "Are you a god?" And she's like, she doesn't say that she is. Technically,
okay,
she's supposed to be one of the immortals. Her
hmm,
rank is her rank is Skankenstein, so she's a nymph. Yeah, she's a nymph, but like that ranks her. She has ambrosia, so technically she's part of the immortal crowd. Same thing with Cersei. Cersei's the only
yeah,
place where this really breaks, where any of this breaks down. But they recast Cersei not as a goddess or
yeah,
demigoddess
just
or
the
even.
witch, yeah,
She's just a witch, and
that's
that's actually
important,
her part of the story is the only part where real magic gets shown. Everything else is pretty subdued, but they could not. Nolan could not get around magic for Cersei. But it is interesting because when they see Cersei, it's like they've entered another movie. Because like even the where she lives, I think it's been like it looks more Celtic. Like it's like they really are, and they're not in Kansas anymore when they meet her. But she's it's the only time where like because she literally does magic and like you see it.
yeah.
um
I suppose they were stuck with that, and they just he decides to sell us on that by giving us some really good body horror
oh yeah, it's
moments, I
pretty good.
suppose, with
it's,
practical
it's
effects. I appreciated the practical effects so much,
it was
and the
gross.
limitations. Yeah, I was like, you're really leaning into this. If you're going to do practical, you better really indulge me with it. And it was disgusting, and I loved every moment of it. Yeah,
Brillian says that I was getting at some of his defense of psychologizing not being necessarily bad or deconstructive. So this
yeah,
is definitely, I will say, this is a very subversive take on Odysseus. The
mm,
subversiveness isn't always meant to be uh, malicious. I think you can be subversive and not be
it's good.
malicious.
Yep,
The
I'm
couple
with
of
you.
twists that are done in this film are subversive. They're deconstruction, subverting your expectation has gotten a very bad rap recently because of films like The Last Jedi, where you take like a really established hero who's supposed to just be a clean cut kind of hero and just tear him to shreds.
Yeah,
This film, Odysseus, even in the core text, is a flawed man. So he's always had some nuance to him. He's not perfect. I mean, like, just case in point, the reason why he ends up on the Odyssey to begin with is because he has a moment of hubris and calls out to Polyphemus, sup, bro, tell your dad that Odysseus poked your eye out.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
like so like and the story
Yeah,
acknowledges.
he can't give up his, he can't just say I'm nobody and leave it at that. He has
Yeah,
to be,
outness or
he
whatever.
has to still be somebody, which means he still has really painful lessons to learn. He can only be immortal, so to speak, when he gives up. He can only come home when he finally becomes nobody, which is not a story. That's not Nolan's version. That's not his regionalization. What's the term that you use? The anime.
Localization? Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
localization. Yeah.
it's not Nolan's localization. But that would be really cool if he explored that. He didn't have to though. He could be more subversive, I suppose, while still respecting the themes of the story. To your point, which I think we're saying that he did. Um,
Well,
maybe to varying success, but
the big change he did, because we talked about Xenia earlier, which is the concept of
yeah.
hospitality. He completely removes one half of Xenia, which is fascinating. So
In Zeus's rule, but doesn't he? he still depicts the other half, right? Like
Oh,
Ithaca is still, he can't get around
oh, sorry.
admitting the
So
other
let, let,
half of
let me let me
Xenia, right?
clarify. Let me clarify.
Mm.
The half he removed is I mentioned that because you're correct. He does show Ithaca that half. Um, the half that he removes, and it's a chunk, is that this epic poem is both sides of Xenia hospitality from good examples and bad examples. So, for example, in the one of the first places they visit, which is kind of the abortive, successful fairy tale version of the story, is they visit King Aeolus, who gives them a wind bag that is literally a magic item that gets you instantly home. It is a bag of literally the wind, and it is a favorable wind, and they see the shore of Ithaca. That's how, and it's like
Mm.
it was like a day. It's like almost like the Phaeacians. It's about, I think it might even be faster. It's basically a teleportation device. They get it. They see the shore of Ithaca, and his crew go, "Oh, we really want to see what's in that bag," and they get tempted, and they get blown right back to Aeolus's palace. And the second reception is the one where he chases them out. But the point here is the fact that with Telemachus with Menelaus, with Odysseus with Aeolus, and Odysseus with the Phaeacians specifically, um, you get to see maybe not utopic, but you get to see the here's how the hosts really treat you right. So because that's the positive of Xenia, because the instruction of the Odyssey, like I said, it being the sort of how to be a proper ancient Greek, is to
Mm.
not just show the negative examples, but to show the positive ones and to contrast them and to even show the limitations of being positive, because the Phaeacians end up getting punished for being so generous. And so it's like
Mm.
you doing the right thing isn't always going to be rewarded. So you should still be hospitable, but there are, maybe there are lines to being too hospitable, and there could still be consequences. Poseidon might still throw a boulder at your town. So there's nuance. It's not just do good thing, all good deeds get rewarded. The Greeks weren't Veggie
Yeah.
Tales. It's not just a simple moral that you stick in like a cherry on the milkshake. The thing is that Nolan's universe cannot exist with the message he wants to impart about a flagging American empire that is, having to basically get psychologized. He can't quite deliver that same message if he portrays the other side of Xenia. So he completely cuts it out. And so the Odyssey here is all the monsters and none of the good hosts who are like Santa Claus. Because there's like a couple of them that are. In the actual story, you get a little bit of balance between the monsters and Santa showing up and being like, ho, 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 here's a present. And this
Yeah.
story is very much focused on the string of monsters. And
Hmm.
because it's doing this mournful elegy of America's journey into the east.
That's good.
Um,
Hmm.
and the Skagenstein says they unlock fast travel. They totally do. uh, so, uh, but because only that because that positive side of Xenia is removed, Nolan can get at his, like I said, the real thing he wants to do, which is that moment with Athena. The whole film is to build up to that moment with Athena, which is to have the warrior basically have an Oppenheimer moment. I'm a good guy. I invented a bad thing. I did something that led to a lot of death, and I'm having to. Even if we did it for our own survival, even if we did it for good reasons, the cost was still great. I still must go through a flagellation. And so America
Yeah.
in media is very self-flagellant at this current epoch.
Mm.
I'm not again defending that, but that's just the current like zeitgeist. America just often the superheroes have to get punished. Our mythic portrayals have to be they have to go through a lashing of some kind. They can't just play it straight because of the experience I think we've been through and the fact that we are too aware of the consequences of our own actions because of the as you mentioned, like we drop a bomb tonight tomorrow morning we get to see exactly what it cost us. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
that wasn't always the case. The instant feedback wasn't so like our timing for our feedback loop is been completely altered from that
Mm-hmm.
because of that. So I
Yeah.
think it's Nolan's version of our Odyssey has to go through this. There is a
Yeah.
little there's positivity though, but it's completely where he rewrites the ending. Because the only way to
Yeah.
positively like see your way through this is to um and this is also super American because like the Brits will just kind of like I don't know, just kind of either like embrace the paradox or embrace the anarchy essentially. And America always has a vision of we can go west, young man. Don't they I'm trying to, I think they chase the western sun if I'm not mistaken at the end of the film. I think
I
they were
think you're
chasing.
right. Yeah.
So, so that idea that the American can always go west, and that's what he and Penelope do. They abandon the kingdom. They leave it to Telemachus. They don't abandon it. They go
Yeah,
into
they
exile.
retire. Yeah.
Yeah, and Telemachus takes the throne. But because Odysseus's final act is to kill all the suitors, the reframing of Zeus's law, which is not the way it is in the text, the core
No.
text, but
Yeah.
in the moral universe that Nolan envisions, the fact that he has once again killed a bunch of people to do what to exist, is there still has to be a sort of punishment for that, and so Odysseus threads the needle by and that's why Telemachus does not get to really join in on the slaughter. He kills one person in kind of self-defense, and it's in another room. He's completely removed from the brawl. Um, but so it's the film is subversive in some ways, but not subversive in others. In the 90s, I want to point this out. In the 1990s, all right, I want to let's see if Matt, you and I or chat are on the same page here. So in the night, even as early, I say early, as the 1990s, if you did a Hollywood version of the Odyssey, Hollywood, capital H Hollywood, and you have the final brawl with the suitors, who would be on Odysseus's team smacking and killing people? Obviously, we have Odysseus, and we'd have Telemachus. Who else would be on the team?
That was in the room in Nolan's version.
Right.
Penelope.
Or there we go. So in the 90s, Penelope would grab a frying pan because that was like, we have to do the kind of feminine coded, I'm going to show my physical might and power.
Or she'd be like
So
Xena warrior princess mode or something. Yeah.
that would be like, I think that's like more 2000s. Like 2000s, she'd be
Okay.
Xena. In the 90s, she'd
Okay.
pick up a frying pan.
Yeah.
So one
Okay.
of the two, right? So, but Nolan does not take that route at all. So if this film, so to say to some people who are going, oh, it's so woke, it's not as woke as you might think, even if you're very woke alert, because apart from Penelope making a couple of snarks um, at Telemachus, which you can interpret as just her bristling at her son, she does not. She plays Penelope's role, and there isn't a you know strong female independent character put into the story who's not there, who has to beat all the guys. Cersei has a kind of like an anti-male, she doesn't like men, she's a
Yeah.
witch,
Which is
like
fine.
that's
She's
not,
not. I mean,
yeah, like
she's another. She's not a. She's not a. She's a villain in the story. So.
yeah. So what I'm saying is that although the core of the story has subversive aspects to it, it's not subversive on every point in the malicious way that we have been used to seeing in Hollywood. To land that thought. I
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to talk about, and so I apologize that my thoughts are a little like they take sometimes a little while to land. So I'm trying to get a little land them faster. But it is a subversive take in some ways, but that fits with what his goal is in portraying, like I said, the myth of the American Empire, because it feels like if he were to just reinforce the American Empire is golden and great and everything's going fine, I just like I would just put it to chat, put it to the audience. Would that resonate? Would that work? Would that feel correct? Um, I just
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Nolan did it right. I'm just saying, would the right thing have been to just, you know, make it all about glory and the empire? I just we're not in that
Yeah.
spot right now for as America. So I just
It Nolan's like we also we got to give I think we also have to recognize you're helping me to understand this that like Nolan has a different job than we have. Like most of us have jobs where we're told what we're going to do that day. Nolan gets to pick what stories he's going to tell. So he wasn't asked to tell this story. He chose it. So if he's going to do the Odyssey, he's going to do it because he's inspired because he thinks it's relevant. It's the sort of story that resonates with him and with audiences right now in 2026. Like it's not like he was given this job and he's like, well, I'm gonna make the most of this. I guess I'm gonna maybe I'll be subversive or I'll make it dreary. He's like, I need to tell a story uh, that isn't just Oppenheimer again. I've actually he many people have pointed out he's kind of told the Oppenheimer's story like 5 or 6 times now. Dunkirk and this or that, but like we're actually going to advance the story a bit. We talked about this a bit with Nick also of it. We actually have to say something a bit more than just we regret the cost of the empire. We're actually going to say positively that we still have time there, even though it's been 20 years in Iraq or in Afghanistan or something. There's still time to come home and restore, to elevate, for the father to be reconciled with the wife who was faithful all this time. There's still time to reunite with that. She still loves you, bro. And we
that's an
still have
American.
time to
Yeah,
elevate that son who is ready for manhood to take on as the next generation. Um, and we can hand things off to him in a proper way. Still, there's still time for that. That was an enormously positive ending that is almost uncanny. Like, and again, like it's not that Nolan was forced to write a happy ending because there's a happy ending that's requested of him in the Odyssey. He read, I suppose he read a treatment of the Odyssey and then said, you know what, it's time to land this with a happy ending. It's time to
can I
tell a
can I
happy
actually
ending to Oppenheimer.
let me actually bounce off of that. He actually
Mm-hmm.
subverts his own subversion right there at
Okay.
the end, because I think Chad will love this, especially those who are still maybe on the fence about some aspects of this, which I'm still on the fence on a lot of aspects of this. I'm still figuring out exactly how I feel about this movie. So if I come
Yeah.
across as I really enjoy exploring these things, I'm still on the fence exactly about how I feel about parts of this movie. So, to be clear, but let me say that the ending, Nolan has set up a story, and this is something that storytellers can really resonate with. So again, Matt, let's let's play a little game again. So the ingredients he set up when Odysseus collapses in Penelope's arms, after having that moment of, I'm the grizzled veteran from Iraq who or Iran or the Middle East who's killed people, and there's blood on my hands, there's blood on my hands again, and we're
Yeah.
in this sort of like apologetic mode, this kind of martyrdom, this mode where the only path forward would be to, again, as a storyteller, if I'm doing Mad Libs, fill in the blanks, he needs to live happy. Does he get his happy ending, or is the happy ending that he, like, again, you and I are both storytellers, like our pen is in the air, like the setup that Nolan put there is to for him to die.
I was like, oh, that the, most storytellers, you can, at least with cinema, with film, you're allowed one subversion. Most people, most audiences are cool with one subversion, and it has to happen at the very end,
Uh-huh.
right? And I was like, oh, he's totally gonna, like, that's the one subversion he's gonna do. I knew he was gonna. I was like, this is exact. It was a brilliant twist because we are so used to Nolan doing that. And I was like, this actually feels right, and it's gonna bring me to tears. He's gonna kill Odysseus right at the moment of Penelope recognizing him. That's exactly what I thought he was gonna do. It was like, this is inevitable. Everything's pointing to this.
I had that moment, and I remember
Yeah.
in the theater going, "Oh, don't you dare!"
Yeah.
I had that moment. Oh, don't you dare! Because the story, again, like I said, as storytellers, because like when you're crafting your own narrative, there's certain things where it's like this character, like Darth Vader, the only path for Darth Vader was to die. Like just the way that whole story is set up, the only
Of
way that
course.
story
Yeah.
like works on an emotional level properly is for him to die. Because if he lives, it's like he's a war criminal. What the hell are we doing with this guy? The only way the story
Mm.
feels right is if Darth Vader dies right after reconciling, doing the right thing. It's just how the story has to be. It's just kind of like how storytelling like works when you're like in your when your hands are molding with those pieces. So the way that Nolan had set those pieces up, it was like, oh, we're killing Odysseus. That's his redemption is at the cost of his own life in a sort of self-sacrificial kind of a way, and that's how
Yeah.
peace will be made because he's a man of war, and he's killed so many, been a part of so much death. The only way for the story to kind of balance the scales here is for him to die, and
Yep.
this and in a very
It could have
Odyssean.
worked. He could have done that. And yeah, that wouldn't have been outside of the realm of the narrative drive that he was composing for us. Yep.
And what he
And
does
and
instead.
and, and just one more little thing, like he could have, that would have still been an advance of the story that he began with Oppenheimer, because he doesn't get to kill off Oppenheimer, but maybe he could have said, now we can conclude. We don't just get uh uh Gillian Murphy or whatever his name is, like having panic attacks in a theater. We actually get to kill him off, and that's how we move, and that's how Telemachus can finally be be elevated to king. And I absolutely thought he was going to do that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
but yeah,
no,
that still would have been an advancement of the story. It wouldn't just been a mere repeat, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
mm-hmm. uh Were you saying it wouldn't be a mere repeat or would have been a repeat?
It would not have been a repeat
Oh,
in a
okay, okay.
way. He could have done that, and maybe in earlier treatments he was going to, maybe.
I think it was because it's so
Yeah.
set up that way.
Yeah.
But like in almost an Odyssean fashion, he finds the way to thread the needle, and
Oh,
he's like
nice. He tricks us.
he dies in this fact because like she literally Penelope literally says, "Oh, please don't die," and he says, "Oh, I don't mean." The way that she says, he's wounded, and he says, I had to see Ithaca one last time, and she says, don't die, and he's like, what do you mean die? uh he's like, I mean, we're gonna leave Ithaca
Oh,
because
funny.
we're gonna go into exile, which is I mean is a kind of death, but it's
Yeah.
a death where they get to live, and it's the American way of threading the tragic needle of
Mm.
like I said, not necessarily the same way a British person would British, I think, Tale would have done it, but that American sort of sense of we can head out west, we can go out into the wild blue yonder somewhere, and we can find ourselves our own patch
Or
of
the end of the Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
okay, okay.
So there's that. But even that's not a very British story, you know. That's as Scandinavian as anything. But
I guess
yeah. But to
a
your point, yeah.
British modernist, I guess, version would not like
Mhm.
I'm thinking like it would be more like
I'm with you. Yeah.
more ambiguous. The fact that
Uh-huh.
you get your positive happy ending where the hero gets to go off into the sunset, even so. Here's the thing: the American story still has to go through that self-flagellation moment. You still have to go through your punishment, but America's still got this spark, and we won't
Yep.
let ourselves just just accept the muck.
Yep.
Like we're gonna have this so there has to be this little uptick at the end. There's some hope somewhere. So like
Yes.
after going through all of that, you know, subversion or even like therapy, the post traumatic stress moment, all that stuff, there still needs to be that, okay, I'm not going to just die and be mourned. There's going to be a hope I can ride out into the sunset, even if it's kind of like a little open ended, I guess.
Yeah. Did
They're
you
just
feel it was
chasing the setting.
Pollyanna at all? Did you feel like it was a little too sickly sweet? I
No,
could
no,
no.
I don't think so. No, it's actually, it's honestly, it's
Hmm.
Dark Knight Rises in a way. It's like he has the fake
Oh yeah.
death, and then later he's with literally Anne Hathaway. So, I
Yeah.
can speak of that because Nolan uses that same cast of actors so often.
Somebody had
So
AI redid the end of Dark
yeah,
Knight, and I thought probably like almost everybody that we were just making a joke about Nolan, and I have to now think that somebody saw that opening night and made the mental comparison in their head, you know. So
yeah,
it was not merely just a joke about Dark Knight Rises, but that he had repeated a move that he had made at the end of Dark Knight Rises in this movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is fair. Like that's a move he can make. He can earn that kind of super happy ending if but the only way to earn that is through a lot of darkness. 3 hours of it, you know.
can we?
That's where it doesn't feel too sweet. It actually feels like finally a reprieve and a
Yeah,
reward and a release from the tension that you just walked us through. So yeah,
I think it's also because he has that full moment to bolster your point. He's allowed that because he's given permission for that because of the Athena moment, the Athena scene, because
yeah,
he has like a full, it's almost a biblical level of repentance,
yeah.
um, and that's what gives him permission to have that ending. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. I want to. Can we answer? I'd love to answer a question from chat. Skankenstein
Mm-hmm.
says, "Is Odysseus the scapegoat redeemed in a way that Batman was not?" And that's a really interesting question. I don't know. That's a puzzle. That's a thinker.
Was Batman not redeemed for Nolan? Um,
I'd have to think about that because Batman doesn't have the same like blood on his hands. It's more that well, I guess you could say it's more of Batman's put in the more Oppenheimer position of, it's like the things I have created and invented have caused a bunch of unintended consequences that can cause a lot of death. So like in Dark Knight, he's got the the privacy invasion tech, and in the Dark Knight Rises, it's literally a bomb, a nuclear bomb, um, and also the lie he's propagated upon Gotham that gets exposed. So like there's
yeah,
he is a bit sullied. Um, so Batman doesn't have a moment where he really needs to regret, to the point of, I am a man with blood on my hands
mm,
and I need to be flagellated for that. If anything, Batman is more Christ-like, where he's taking on other people's sins.
yeah,
In that trilogy, he's put in a much more messianic frame. Like at the end of the Dark Knight, he's literally taking on other people's crimes on his head.
yeah,
And like Gordon, that the lie is that Batman is taking other people's sins. So
yeah,
I think that, and this is not typical of superheroes, where you take something like from the ancient classical myths and you just like pour gasoline on the fire and accelerate it. Batman is just an accelerated version of these archetypes. So um,
mm-hmm.
yeah, that's my initial read on that. But it's interesting to think about that question.
Yeah.
Um,
Fantastic content from the chat. Skank,
yeah,
so thanks so much for your insights.
Skank says Odysseus tries to absorb all the guilt and save Telemachus from bloody hands. That's true. He does do that. In Batman, his guilt is a fiction. In Odysseus, the guilt are true, but also publicly performed. That is also true. Um, That's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't have a neat way of tying that up, but those are some interesting ideas.
Nobody's
That's
been comparing the Dark Knight
yeah,
trilogy,
that's
and
cool.
they probably should be. They absolutely should be. Except that one person who made the meme about
Yeah, no,
about
that meme's now clicking on a much stronger level for me now. That's hilarious.
yeah, it was
Um,
actually a really genuine, heartfelt meme now. Not it wasn't just cynical irony
so
like I first
so
took
now
it to be.
we now need to answer a very hard question, which is this a good movie or not, and should people see it?
Hmm.
I don't know if I have a good answer.
Yeah.
After
I
all that
mean,
time talking about it, I don't know if I have a good answer.
I'm realizing that I didn't know um I didn't realize how varied and fragmented people's ownership of the Odyssey was. Um, in just even in the American zeitgeist, I didn't realize how little people had to grasp of it, and I didn't realize how differing people's perspectives were on this tale. So I don't know how much Odyssey it, everybody's coming in with much more varied expectations than they would have 50 years ago, you
Hmm.
know, much less from a time even before that. So I don't even know, like it's a tremendous challenge. I found it rewarding. I found it a positive experience, but I really enjoy the classics and I even enjoy the deconstruction of the Iliad by classical uh tragedians and philosophers. And I think
Sure,
that's
sure.
all a part of the conversation that I think is really enriching. That's part of the inheritance. It's not the Iliad and the Odyssey, they're like the story is not a book that you can read. The story is it's it was a lived uh like patterning of a particular worldview of yeah, how can you be a Greek, right? Told narratively, and then like very quickly picked up by subsequent cultures that play with that I feel like is part of our inheritance too, that I think people didn't know about until 2 weeks ago, which is fine. They don't have to. You don't have to be a classics major to enjoy this movie. But I'm starting to think that if you're not super into that stuff, I think this movie is going to confuse you. And I really think he was doing a move where he I think Nolan understood that more than I did, that the story is going to be confusing to modern audiences, and so he said, instead of telling an exotic story, I'm actually going to tell a story about us in a, like the American. He's British, but he's going to tell the American story in 2026
Hmm.
through this. He felt that that would be the best way for most audiences to pick up what he's putting down. So he was, I think he was respectful of the inheritance, but it's definitely it's a localization story, and I think that is part of the Western tradition, is doing localizations of this particular myth. Uh, the Greeks were famous for subverting their own Homeric epic to tell a different spin, and everybody loved that. And then the Romans did the thing of saying, "No, we're just gonna stick with the Trojans now. Thank you very much." And everybody subsequently said that they were the good guys. And I love playing with that
Yeah.
sandbox. And I just don't think most people knew. Um, I think it's a hit or a miss depending on whether or not you appreciate that Nolan decided to point a very uncomfortable mirror at us. Like for some reason that was
Well,
easier
the
to do
mirror.
with Bat.
Yeah. Oh, you bumped your mic. You bumped your mic again. Sorry. Anyway, I love what you're saying about the mirror. That's
Sorry,
exactly what I was thinking.
I I am landing this. I promise. It was easier with Batman for some reason. We were all cool with to Skank's point. classic definitive stories about the war on terror, Bush era war on terror stuff with the first Dark Knight movie and mass surveillance and that sort of thing. But somehow this superhero story, um, I don't think a lot of people were ready for it. I think they didn't realize that it's a superhero, that it could be cast as a superhero story, and talk about the decline and fall of the American Empire and where that leaves us. Um, I think it might be too much for some people to handle. And most people are just not gonna, they don't even have an IMAX nearby. So just to even get the experience that you're describing, which sounds like it's not just because it's a big screen. It actually, the experience is different. It's probably a more enjoyable experience, and it's probably not as enjoyable the way I saw it, and which is the way most people can afford to see it,
Right.
or just have it within their proximity to see it, and then there's going to be millions more that just see it, on their laptops 6 months from now.
Exactly.
So
That's where I feel
it's probably
very.
not for everyone.
What's interesting, there's a paradox there too, right? Because it's not for everyone, but it is. I went to an 11:40 showing in a
Mm,
small town. It was packed. I had to sit in the
wow.
back. It was like there was like two spots left. I was like, what? 11:40 on a Thursday? So like this movie is, as it is getting critical
It was
acclaim. It's
packed where
getting
I was. Yeah.
people
Mm-hmm.
are watching it. It is the summer blockbuster to see. It is because a lot of people go, by the way, a lot of people do go to the movies because of the sort of roller coaster experience. So even in a sort of prosaic way, I'm just here. I've got $15. I got some time off of work. I'm gonna go be entertained for a few hours. Entertain me, and give me that roller coaster ride. And so I think that
Yeah.
that tracks even with some general audiences, and it's clearly resonating. And to some degree, it's getting a lot of people are seeing it. It's making a lot of money. It may not hit Avatar levels or whatever, but like it may. I've not tracked its recent performance, but everything I'd seen was that it's trending quite well. So it is playing somehow to people. So there's something about it that is working. You'd be curious to ask more and see what part is working for general audiences. But something is. People are seeing it. I think that even just the fact that it's pulse pound, like my pulse was elevated. My
Yeah.
cortisol levels were elevated when I saw this movie. I know what happens, and the structure of the story was almost beat for beat. Even when it was adapting it very differently, it was like, okay, Island of the Cyclops, Island of Lestragones. Like it hit most of it, even with Telemachus. Even like the things that were cut, you know, it changed more than it cut. I would say, like it cut the
Mm-hmm.
positive Xenia examples, but it hit pretty much everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So
And can I just boost what you're saying a bit more? Like I went with three other guys. Um, I was the only one that was familiar with the primary texts, and but two of the guys had been consuming a lot of the media around it leading up, and so the framing was like whether or not it's going to be woke, and they had differing opinions about that. The fourth guy didn't know anything. He didn't know anything about the Homeric epic. He never read it, and he was not familiar with the cultural zeitgeist kind of moments either.
mhm.
Like he didn't know like he couldn't tell you there was a Cyclops in this story, and um, he really liked it. He liked it the most, actually. He had the least complicated things to say about it, which is probably to your point. If you go in with a little knowledge, you might have a complicated experience you're not sure how you feel about it. If you go in with a lot, it might ruin it too because you're gonna be whiplashed around trying to keep up with Nolan's direction. But if you don't know anything, which is where most people are today, you might really like it. Does that seem to
Yeah,
track? Do you think there's a lot of young people seeing this? I have to guess at this year, like if you're like 25 and younger and you're seeing this, you probably didn't read the Odyssey in high school. It's probably
hmm
not part of your mandatory reading list anymore by the 2000s, 2010s. So to see this today, you're probably this is the first time you've seen any adaptation. Had one of those experiences, and you're probably enjoying it. It's probably what does that track? Do you think?
I think it might. I think it very
Yeah,
well might. I didn't take a great survey of who I was in the theater with. So I
yeah.
can't, I went by myself. But
I
so
was with
no, it was
like 100 Zoomers. It was really weird. Like
really. Oh,
everybody
that's
was
cool.
30 and younger. Yeah,
I think I had more boomer audiences in mine. I think I had.
really.
I live in a boomery. The area I saw the movie is very boomery. So that's.
Well,
But
that's
even then, like
encouraging. This is a multi generational tale. It's bringing everybody in. That's really cool.
I think, like I
Wow.
said, I think the fact that at least it does most of the as a roller coaster ride, it stops at all the pit stops that
Yeah.
you really need to stop at to
Yeah.
deliver the thrills part of it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that might work for people really well. I want to say that kind of probably similar to you. I think that when I give reviews, I like to, as opposed to say, good, bad, I like to be a little more like, okay, kind of like to bring up Goethe. Goethe on criticism says you judge a work by its own rubric. Like you basically try to see what it's trying to say, and you judge it by that. So you don't judge it by something that it isn't.
Love it.
So
Yep.
yeah, it's really great advice to process certain works, because it's like if you're going into a romance movie, you can't judge the romance movie by your classical antiquity standards. You need to go in, okay, what makes a good romance genre film? What are those expectations? Like judge it where it's at.
Yeah.
So I like to approach things more from that angle and to say, if you are like this movie, you'll enjoy it. I think that as a summer 2026 roller coaster ride, see it in IMAX. Like I said, it was an experience. Like I said, I was pulse pounding the whole way, even though I know what happens. I was like gripping my seat at times when like the Cyclops scene is very well shot, just
It
in terms of
was.
evoking suspense and fear. So just delivering that, and again, those are the types of things where when you're seeing it on a big screen, those things are magnified, which adds to the mythic aspect, but also just it's just darn good visual storytelling in the sense that I am scared because I am seeing a giant thing and it's being framed in darkness, and then even when he was chasing them, he's like he was out of focus, and so he was an ominous presence, and the sound being so loud of thump thump thump, and they're just running, and you're just like, no, go faster. And it was like the T-Rex
Yeah.
chase scene from Jurassic Park. It's just like you just
And
feel wrapped up in being chased by a giant freaking thing. And
and that
Nolan,
was a practical effect too, by the way. Did you see that? It was a giant puppet.
oh
And they
really?
just
Okay.
yeah, they just did 3D magic to you know to to mask the joints of the puppet and to give some
Okay.
animation to the face. But
Oh
that was
cool.
part of the creepiness. Did it feel it almost felt like it was suspended or it had some kind of weird weightlessness to it, which I thought I was like, well, that's a really interesting animation decision to give us a giant puppet like a cyclops that doesn't feel heavy. It feels like he's floating almost at times, which was super creepy. And it's because it was a little it was a marionette, with strings. That's why
I
it
didn't
felt
know
like
that.
it.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it was
cool.
struggling to feel like it had weight, and that added so much to it. They could have just done CG. I'm so glad they didn't.
It looked
Yeah,
good enough. I thought it was CG. Honestly, I did, but I was just wrapped up. Again, the IMAX theater is very loud, and again, because of the
yeah.
sound choices being made, I was just getting like really just again caught up in just the 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 spectacle. It's Hollywood is
It is a
spectacle. This is
spectacle.
something when you study there's developments in drama, just like in England and such, that just you have Shakespeare, and then you have the rise of spectacle drama where they start relying more on special effects and just wowing you with the visuals, and it's less about like the intricacies of dialogue.
Yep.
So this is a spectacle rich story that still has emotional resonance at times. Like I said, I teared up with some of it. You
Really?
know, I mean, the
Oh man.
dog, obviously the dog, there's
Yeah.
the him with the son, like those reunion moments are always going to be tear jerkers. Like
I
it's
wish I
just
had saw it with you. That's so great. That's awesome. Yeah. But this is a
um
great, in a way, I did see it with you. This is, I can't remember the
mhm,
last time I was talking with Nick about this. It feels like Avengers Endgame, maybe, was the last time it really felt like there was this seminal summer moment where
mhm.
everybody saw something, we have this shared cultural experience that's more than even a national experience. It's like it's a moment where everybody everywhere seems to be engaged in a single narrative and exploring it together. So we did see it together, which is
Yeah, no, you're right. We're part of a shared moment there.
Mhm.
So Pseudo Risto says Gen Z is already dressing up. Let's give them something to dress up for. If Nolan has his Nebuchadnezzar experience, Who Boy will be in for some great movies. So yeah, to land my
Hmm.
plane here, this movie I
Yep.
think is a great roller coaster ride. If you're gonna see it in IMAX, I think you will enjoy the roller coaster aspect of it if that's the expectation you go with. If you go in here into this film with any sense of, I'm not even going to say historical accuracy, because not even the Greeks, I think, cared as much about accuracy when they were doing it at the time.
Yeah.
But I will say that there's a type of authenticity. This is why I mentioned earlier with the EFAP crowd, where they were like, it doesn't sound right when they're talking American. They should be talking British. And it's like, there's no reason for that, but it is an expectation people have. And if you
Yeah.
have expectations of certain types of authenticity, this film will annoy you. And I think it will annoy you
Yeah.
more than you'll enjoy it. And that I think explains a chunk of criticism, and I have no answer for that criticism. And I also, when I talk about this movie, I'm not glowing with the sort of like I disagree with Peugeot's take. I think Peugeot was way too generous. Because I don't think Peugeot acknowledges much of the subversion that's going on here. He tracked the theme of the father restoring the homeland. And I'm like, there's like the theme here has a lot more to do with a veteran confronting like American war guilt than the father returning to the homeland. Like that's there, but it's being way outweighed by this other thing. It's like a giant rock. But I will say that I would be lying to say that I didn't enjoy the roller coaster ride and didn't get wrapped up in some of the emotions that happened. Um, I was able to tune out of the language disconnect, and I just processed it as just people talking. And that once I was, again, IMAX helped with this because I felt like I was part of Odysseus's crew and I was riding along with them, and so I just kind of started accepting things. And once I started accepting things, it's like the Prestige. It's an illusion that gets cast on you, and once you're spellbound, it'll work. So if you're watching it on a phone, the spell doesn't work. So I went purposefully into
That's
um
great.
the illusionist's palace into his home in the way so he could cast the illusion at maximum strength. I purposefully did that. I'm like, okay, I know you're a prestidigitator. And I know you purposefully built apparatus on top of because he built, I think he invented something for the IMAX camera to reduce the sound because the camera is very loud. So like you purposely built this to fit this mode. So okay, prestidigitator, I'm going to go into your house of mirrors, let you cast your spell on me. And
What
so
what what is this? What is this word you're using? Prestidigitator.
yeah,
Help.
yeah, it's just,
Can you break that down? What?
it's just magician. Just
Okay.
prestidigitation is just another word for basically mad, doing like, table magician,
Yeah.
table or stage magician.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Just
uh,
just Greek for magician or something.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You're doing a stage magician thing, but you want me to go into your house of mirrors so that you can cast your spell at 100% strength. So I
Yeah.
walked in. I walked in to be fully hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I did that, I think I got the maximum strength value out of this film
Mm.
cinema experience, which helped. Um, like I said, if you are willing to pay that ticket and go into that, I think you'll get more out of it, and enjoy that ride. Um, but like I said, if you go in with a sense of like a certain types of authenticity, like I said, every 30 seconds will probably annoy the hell out of you, because you'll be constantly. The criticism I've seen is people who are in that mode, mindset, they're constantly being jerked out of the film. Every time Odysseus speaks a line that's very terse, and translated, localized in a way that they're not expecting,
Yeah.
they're just getting yanked out of the film. And like I said earlier, we talked about this early in the stream. What's interesting is that depending on who is localizing Homer, um, like I said, one thing that got brought up, this is actually germane to the Wilson firestorm that's happening. A guy named Platoon, he was on Mahler's stream, said something really fascinating. He said that Wilson is technically, when she translates at times, being more, might be missing the figurative, but she's being technically more literal. And that's where that's why I mentioned localization, because when you
Yeah.
do localization, you can either translate the word exactly what it means. So one example is, Fagels will say whore, slut, or bitch to basically talk about some of the women who are, sleeping with the suitors, and because that's like what you would express negatively towards women if they were to act that way. That's how we would process that. But I think the literal word is dog face. So
Mm.
it's not hard to see how you'd go from dog face to bitch, but Wilson, I think, just literally says, well, technically it says dog face. But if you have someone just say, you dog face, in theory, you're being more technically accurate to the translation, but you're not localizing it. You're not making it
It's a great
accessible
point.
to what people are expressing in that moment. So what's interesting about that isn't to say that Wilson is wrong or that Fagels is right or anything like that, but it's to say that what we expect when we think of Greek speech, it's a there's a whole bunch of scholars who've been having this conversation for hundreds of years and translating this work over and over and over again, and all of them saying this is the way I think it should be done. Nolan chooses to make this very American, and if you're willing to accept that, the spell will work. If that jerks you out of the film, you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna get so annoyed. And I think that there are people who are very justified in necessarily, and it's fine to have that expectation. It's just, um, Colin says dog face, no wonder Peugeot like this one. So, um,
Yeah.
but Colin
Yeah.
says, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So he's bringing up the Greeks did not care about accuracy. Homer was a historian. That's what oral tradition was. The Odyssey was not fiction to the Greeks. That is a debatable question. Depending, we were
Yeah.
talking about this earlier, because when you
I
get
might
to
disagree with that. Yeah.
some of the Greeks actually did treat it as fiction, including, what was it? Was it Plato? He treated it
Yeah.
very fictionally. So it's there was, I guess the
Most
thing
of
to
the
say,
philosophers treated it as fiction. And
there was
there was just different degrees of how you could save Homer from himself, because the Homeric epics are not like that's inherited from a world that was hundreds of years removed from the literate culture that wrote it down and tried to have to navigate it and struggled mightily to justify and legitimate its presence in the classical world, and sometimes they did contortionist moves to do so. We might call them like the classical Greeks would be like the progressive. I don't know. Like they would put Emily Wilson to shame with the contortionist, the gymnastics that they would do to make to make it relevant, to justify its existence in the classical world. Which is part of the interesting factor of it. They didn't think. I mean, history. I mean, the Greeks invent history, but
if I
that's
may,
coming from a different perspective. I mean, you read Herodotus. Herodotus reads very differently than Homer, and there's a reason, because it comes from a it's a very different part of the Greek world, and it comes hundreds of years later.
I have
Anyway,
another
yeah,
I have
hmm
another angle on Colin's point, which is the fact
yeah,
that at that time it would be seen more by many people as more literal. But to bring up what is brought up in the Fagel's edition that I read, they talk about the fact that even in Homer's time, it was not purely history because of how the amount of improv they were doing. Because when they studied the oral tradition, the people who kind of do something similar to what Homer does today, there's a rough structure to it, but they do a lot of improvisation. They add stuff. They did
yeah,
subtract stuff. They'll add a theme because they said, oh, how did Homer perform this? So they went and observed like oral bards who are similar to Homer today, and they noticed, how do you people perform these very long pieces? Do you memorize every single line? And like what they noticed is that, no duh, if you had to memorize every single line, there would be no bardic tradition. You'd have one idiot savant who could do it, and that'd be it. So what ends up happening more
yeah. You'd
practically,
have like recitation of the Quran or something. Yeah, which is why
so
we said earlier that like even Homer is an adaptation. If there was a history and they believed that there was a history, they decided to elevate a poetic expression of that history
that
through
did have some
through
variants
what we
to it.
have
Yeah.
as Homer. But Homer wasn't the history. Homer was the epic poem of the history, if that makes sense. So
No, that yeah, yeah.
the earliest expression we have of it is the poetic, uh, like meant to be entertaining, told over 3 nights edition version of it. The Nolanification goes all the way down.
That's kind of that was interesting, is the fact that even in Homer's time, he was taking these things that were more literal, as Colin mentions, um, or were seen by many as more literal, and he's still making art out of it. And that art is not just a recitation of history one to one, because he is, and other oral performers are, bards and such are, like I said, they're adding stuff to the story as they go. There are details that get trimmed, left off. Each performance is unique, and so it's not just a recitation of exact history moments in a linear kind of chronological fashion. This is an art, and so it is. And as you mentioned, which I think is so poignant, is the fact that Homer is himself adapting. He is an adapter. So he's not trying to just be a historian himself, although history is part of what he's doing. So
Yeah,
there's some complexity there. I think is we can kind of
yeah. That's not us trying to crack open uh, an opportunity for us to shove a bunch of identity politics or something into it.
yeah, yeah.
That like a lot of people you would absolutely respect their I mean, not their credentials, but their genuine enthusiasm and deep love for this tradition, disagree mightily on these things, and have for hundreds of years, well, thousands of years. And I think that's fascinating. That's part of why I'm actually grateful that the story at its origin, as far as we know, starts as a work of art and not a work of history, uh, because that gives us permission to interpret it and reinterpret it as art, and to turn it and to try new modes and to express it in tragic ways, more tragic than the first version of the art may have implied, or to lean in different directions or to subvert in a particular way. I mean, I know that's a poison term we already talked about, but like that actually gives us the permission to make it more immediately recognizable from culture to culture too, as well. You know, Making it relevant is another overused term, but to make it something that resonates with people, because it's a very resonant text. If it was just history, it wouldn't be as resonant, but it's primarily a work of art first, and that allows it to be something that can be foundational for subsequent cultures for thousands of years because it's a work of art. If it was a work of history primarily and understood as such and formatted as such, it couldn't be foundational to the Romans. It couldn't be foundational to the British Empire, to America. It wouldn't be capturing as much attention as it is today, I think, in Nolan's work. That's my
It's
defense of and that's not to say art versus history, because we're not doing that either.
right.
But
Yeah.
because it's primarily art, it we can see ourselves in it more clearly, I think. And yeah, yeah.
I almost feel like
Um,
like we should bring Colin on. We're like going back and forth.
I know,
But my final
I know
thing
he
on
doesn't
that,
like this.
it's a take. It is a take on the Odyssey. It is not a at I think it is much more a take on the Odyssey than it is an adaptation on the Odyssey. That's an important distinction to make. If you are looking for an adaptation of the Odyssey with the
Interesting.
authenticity that it's like this is not your film. It is no because Nolan deliberately like dresses Agamemnon as Batman with a spinal cord coming out the back. Like that's a choice. Like he didn't just go, "Oh, I don't know what history is." He said, "I want
Yeah.
this guy to look symbolically different because of the point I'm making about this being an American Odyssey." And it's like,
This isn't
okay,
a book report.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is yeah. Hmm.
Which if it were a book report, he gets an F. Like I have no problem saying that.
Yes.
But this is him. He's like, this is my interpretation of it. Kind of like how like West Side Story and other things are interpretations of Shakespeare. And it's like you're doing something because you want to take this piece of art and you want to do something with it yourself.
Or how
And
about
they're
it's what Shakespeare did with Julius
right.
Caesar
Yeah, yeah,
or
fair.
with Hamlet. Like, yeah, is that subversive, or even, yeah, to play within the limits of what was politically appropriate, um and to do it to do it in some way that allowed uh Elizabethan Englanders to see themselves in a very alien culture and have that be reflected back to them. We don't discount Shakespeare for doing that, and at least a third of his plays are set in ancient Rome. you know there's a reason for that.
I mean, like you
um
could also just bring up like Midsummer's Night Dream, where he's like, this is taking place in Greece, but it just sounds like it's England. It's taking place in England, but they
yeah,
call it Greece. And so it's just it creates a fugue that allows Shakespeare to tell the story he wants to tell.
yeah.
But there's no sense of historical, and that's not to say. Let me put it this way: there are different. There is a version of the Odyssey that I would love, honestly, George Alexopoulos, who has been banging this gong for a while. He is like, I grew up like near. I don't know if he grew up in Ithaca or near Ithaca. He's like, I've been to these places. Like he actually like knows some of the locations that this takes place in. He's like, I grew up here. I lived there. I know that spot. And so I want Alexopoulos, instead of doing a handgun's tale, which is I think the name he was proposing, I'm like, I want Alexopoulos to bring the heat, and I will show up. I'll be the first one to show up for his version of the Odyssey, where he commits to a historical authenticity. So like, I'm not saying I don't support that. Okay, let me be very clear. I totally support that. And I'm just saying this is Hollywood's Hollywoodification of that myth. Um, and it is intriguing and interesting to see how Nolan is able to deliver on it. And it is enjoyable as that cinematic experience for what it is. Despite all of that, I do struggle to call it a great film or great movie. It's so I still say at the
Interesting.
end of the day, I can describe who this would appeal to. If you ask me, like, flat out, is this good? Man, like I just feel like I'm gonna have to sit down and do exactly what we just did, which has have like a 3.5 hour conversation where we flesh all this stuff out. Cause I don't have a clean answer.
Hmm.
It's a complex, I'm just gonna quote the Odyssey. Tell me a story of a complex man. Just tell me a
Yeah.
story about a complex adaptation
Yeah.
cinematically,
Like
twists and turns.
I'm thinking of Matt Reese. Like I would beg him to never see this film. Please never see this film.
Please never see this movie.
And anyone like you, anyone in
I
your
don't.
vicinity who marginally agrees with you about what adaptation is supposed to be and what is right and wrong in
I don't think he
adaptation.
likes Nolan. I don't think he's even gonna bother.
Good. Please stay far away. Save your buddy. Yeah. But it's a complicated, yeah. I mean, good job making a complicated film, getting everyone talking. That seems, at least we could say that feels thematically respectful and resonant with the character of Odysseus. Even if we didn't see him very trickstery, the film was um
He's clever. Let me
it's
be
got
completely
everyone
fair.
talking 2 weeks straight.
People keep saying he's not a trickster. He doesn't. I want to actually argue. I want to push back just a little bit on that. I did miss the fact he doesn't do Autis. Is that how you pronounce it? Nobody. Autis and
Oh
Metis.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't do that. That's a shame. That's a miss. But he does. He is very clever. Nolan makes sure that he's the first one to notice any of the details. He's a planner, and he does manipulate them. So he does do some of the tricky, deceiving stuff. Like when he plays the crew to pick Scylla instead of Charybdis, and he actually like puppets them, and he's like, we should go for Charybdis, and they go, no, that's dangerous, we're doing Scylla instead, and he just kind of goes, oh, okay, bro, you take the helm, and then
Yeah,
later on
he
he tricks
tricks the that's an important point. The only real trickery that happens, I mean, there's the trick. We're told about the trick and then we finally see it.
mm-hmm.
I mean, the great trick is the great sin, which is the Trojan horse.
Sure.
But then like in dialogue, like at the ground level, relationally, the tricks that happen throughout the story is him having to trick the
The
gods,
crew.
helping him understanding what tricking actually means and looks like, and whether or not he's being tricked by gods, and then him tricking the the guys on his boat, his own men. Yeah, which is dark in a way.
Well, yeah, because the trick he pulls on Sinan is a big reveal later, because he has to, yeah.
Yeah,
So what I'm saying
it's
is that,
those
like,
tricks. Yeah,
the people who I've seen a few people who say there is no trickster at all, and I'm like, okay, can we stop being so binary? Like, maybe it didn't live up to the expectations that people had, and again, there's no Autis, that sucks. There's no I'm nobody, that again, sorry, I definitely, that sucked, but he is a trickster, and he does do tricking in the film, so like, it's Nolan's version of it, but it's there.
yeah.
So
I wouldn't have liked the nobody. I was happy to not get that because you would have had to build that particular expectation of that kind of character who would shout something like that, you know? And then
mhm.
and I don't think that was the mood he was going for. So I think it had to be more visceral, the repartee, you know? He just had to shoot him with an extra arrow, I suppose. That
Yeah,
maybe that fell flat for little people. But yeah. Yeah, that's really important. You're right. There was a lot of trickery, but the mode in which that was expressed was in lying. That's how we got talked about with this. He was a
mhm.
liar, and
He
navigating
lies
that.
constantly in he lies constantly in the source text. He won't stop.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, so that at least tracks. He lies less in this movie. Every single time he goes to one of these houses, when he's, it's
yeah,
another lie. I got tired of reading the fake history he made up for himself. I'm from Crete. Oh, sure you are. Okay, I have to read this again.
yeah. He's the king of tricksters. He's the king of liars, and he's the one telling this story. I mean, so like, how historical is it going to be? Like, it's more about you're going to have to learn to understand this man, this complicated lying man, and see if you actually appreciate who the sort of person he is in the story he's telling. You know, which is going to include lies. He might be lying to you about where he's been. You know, but that's
Yeah, most
part of the
definitely.
yeah, yeah. Wow. I didn't think we'd have this much to unpack. This is great. I knew I had an entirely different live stream to have with you, and I knew we could have a full chat from an entirely different perspective and not overlap with the previous one. but I didn't know we'd have 2.5 hours, which is great.
I got more. I'm
Yeah,
kidding. No, I'm good. I'm good with cut. I'm just saying. I've been thinking about this for a bit, and there was a lot to think about, and I was very interested in thinking about it. And
yeah,
watching the film and trying to think about while I was watching it was also interesting. While also experiencing the movie, I was trying to like do both modes at once. I'm not
yeah.
sure if I want to see it. I want to see it again with my wife because I think it'd be fun to go with her. But
Oh yeah, same.
I'm not like again when this comes out on DVD. I don't think I want to experience because like the experience was seeing it in the House of Mirrors, which is the IMAX. Like seeing it on like a TV, I don't. I think I'd just be like, eh. Which is what I think what a lot of people who aren't enjoying it are saying. And I think some of them, whether they're pirating it or otherwise, may be in fact seeing it that way, and going,
Yeah,
eh. And that's
yep,
probably a perfectly so that's when I said like at the end of the day, this may be a good cinematic experience, like a roller coaster ride. I think it might not be a good movie to take home with you. And that is a consequence of how Nolan chose to construct this thing. And
yeah,
it's important to think about that because movies do not trend. We think about screens. You were talking about this earlier. Screens are everywhere, and so we don't think about screens. Seeing a movie on a phone is not the same as seeing it on IMAX, which is not the same as seeing it in Letterbox, which is not the same as seeing it on a TV. Screens are not the same, and that has a consequence upon a potential consequence on the reception of the media
yeah,
unless you are purely devouring plot details. If you're just like cataloging plot details, then it doesn't matter how you get that information. You could read a Wikipedia article and get it. But if
yeah.
you're
Or
trying to like
checking for historical accuracy or something. Yeah,
uh but as a like I said, as an experience, Nolan chose to construct something that works its spell in I think a particular arena, but that I think it plays well this summer. But I think it may radically change how people revisit this. 5 years after this, when people do their video essays and talk about the Odyssey, it might like because they won't be able to go back and see it on the big screen. They'll only be able to watch it on their small monitors.
wow.
So I think the retrospective on this film, I think, could be completely the opposite of what the reception may be today, just because of just how you see it. And that's something that I don't think gets enough attention when we talk about film criticism. We just talk about oftentimes we often zero in on some of the like plot, which is very important to talk about. I'm not saying it isn't,
That's
but
how I felt about Avatar when I watched it in 3D at a midnight showing. I was like, this is the best movie of an age. This, I haven't seen something this good in 10 years. And I was like, I am prepared that people are going to say the first Avatar movie, uh, is a historical moment in the history of cinema, and that's probably the most wrong take I've ever had about movies, because almost no one saw it in 3D, and even if they did, you can't recapture that in 3D later.
yeah,
So it in hindsight, it became something that you could watch on Netflix on your laptop, same as anything else. And on that level, it was not a great movie, and that was it was picked apart pretty quickly as Dances with Wolves in Space. But no people entirely forgot that it was filmed to be enjoyed in 3D, as a roller coaster ride.
yeah.
So yeah, that's your point. It's probably not going to be remembered as a great film.
And
The
it'll
Odyssey.
deserve that because of big. But it's interesting, like when you construct your story, how you deliver it, even on a screen, matters.
Yeah,
And
it
so
does.
Nolan chose this way, and that
Yeah,
itself is a risk.
which has a
And that
shelf life, a very short shelf life. Yeah,
hmm hmm
yeah. What a challenge. Yeah, what a trade off. Yeah.
uh, Colin says, "How does he defeat Cersei without Hermes showing up?" Do you want to get into specific spoilers before we wrap up?
Do you really want to know, Colin?
I was gonna say, I almost like,
I mean, it again, like, this is theater, right? So this is about acting performances and character growth, and picking apart, um the main character and presenting him with progressive challenges that so that he can hopefully demonstrate growth by being confronted with antagonists. It's not about the gods, which I thought coming into this I had a big reveal about Athena, but Twitless quickly corrected. He convinced me in real time that that was not the case, and the other gods are absent or just in a very Greek fashion analogized as just natural forces. So
Cersei's the closest
it's
we get. She's and they just go the witch route with her.
yeah,
Odysseus pulls a leverage moment with her, a point of like violent leverage, which is not entirely dissimilar to what he does with as so he threatens her, but he just threatens her a little differently. So it plays out more or less the same. Um, so it's not really that different. Like in terms of like it's how he delivers it. If you actually just go with like what Nolan's doing, it's like he visits Cersei's island, he threatens her, she changes her mind, she tells him to go to the land of the dead. Like that's beat for beat what happens in the text. It's how he is delivering it that's all the difference that causes all the controversy and the differences of opinion because he's technically hitting all the points. He's just hitting
mm,
them differently. So again, like I said, your mileage will vary on that point, but he does do the thing. In the core text, he threatens her with a knife, and in this one, he threatens her just a little differently.
yeah,
It's the same. It's the same setup.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think in some ways there's two types of appreciators of canonical works like these. Um, there are people who appreciate them in a way where they want to preserve them primarily, and so they want to see it accurately or faithfully carried forth. And I think that's a very valid approach to appreciating a a work that is seminal and foundational like the Odyssey. And there's another mode though, which is also valid in my view, which is to appreciate it through handling it, through manipulating it, through finding its strengths and its weak points. Turning it over and putting it back on its pedestal at a different angle. And I think we have a story tradition of doing the latter with this particular work. There's much more very respectable work that we also think of as canon, like Virgil's Aeneid, like Aeschylus, like Sophocles, like Shakespeare, that play with these themes in and sometimes radically reinterpret content, but in a respect, but they're doing it not uh, to break it, but to handle it and to lovingly put their fingerprints all over it, and to know it through feel and touch, and not just by looking at it in a glass case. That's my argument for what Nolan did, and I'm very much of that second approach. That's what I try to do with Kyrie, with the classics, is to handle and touch and manipulate the classics, because I care about them, and I don't, and I'm not pitting those two approaches again. It may sound like that I have a preference, but I think both of them go hand in hand. The only way you get the Homeric epics is because some people decide to faithfully preserve them. You also only get them because the Romans manipulated them, and because Shakespeare found it, and his audience found the Homeric epics, the classical stories intensely fascinating too. You because you get Dante putting Odysseus in the eighth circle of hell, like a true Italian would, right?
Yep.
This is all part of the conversation, and I that manipulative history of this work demonstrates to its endurance. The fact that it hasn't been broken yet demonstrates the endurance of that, and all the ways in which it's been manhandled. I think lovingly. Um, like if you ever had a reason to read the works, there's so many people who have never read them who are reading them now, including good friends of mine. I think that's fantastic. It's fabulous. I
Yeah,
hope they
yeah,
also
definitely.
read Sophocles, but but sure, read Homer. Absolutely read Homer. You know,
May I,
um,
since you mentioned
yeah,
Sophocles, can I do a very brief dunk on some of the
of
Antigone
course.
discourse?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
very, very, very fast. This is book from book three, King Nestor. King Nestor's visit. But he basically says that that if Menelaus had found the murderer of Agamemnon, if his brother had found him,
yeah.
no barrow piled high on the earth for his dead body. No, the dogs and birds would have feasted on his corpse,
That's
and
good.
no one would have wept a moment. I just want to point out the fact that I do see some asinine Antigone discourse occasionally that says that Antigone was right the whole way through and that burying the dead traitor is the way to go. And I just want to point out that the conversation about what to do with a really really harsh criminal like betraying a city and opening the gates for some of them, which is one of the worst things you could do against the polis, um, there would be some conversation about how to navigate that situation and that Creon isn't necessarily cast entirely in the wrong. I just want to point out that there are some additional sources from antiquity that will
No, that's
back up
good.
Creon's perspective. Just want to throw that out there. So,
No,
I
yeah.
get a little bee in my bonnet when people just take Antigone's side. So just wanted to I
When
had a little
when
chuckle.
when I say that I am an absolute 100% Antigone simp, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm doing that second mode. Is I'm entering into the dialogue, and manipulating the text lovingly, knowing full well that other people are lovingly manipulating it. I keep saying manipulate. I just mean like holding it in one's hands.
You bumped your mic there, bud. I'm just gonna say I'm on
Yeah,
Creon's side for most of the play. He makes like
yeah.
one freaking mistake. But
That's
that's a
it's
separate
why
conversation.
it's a
We should
tragedy.
talk about.
Yeah, that's why it's a tragedy. Like when I I'm just saying I'm inviting. I hope people disagree with me. As they love this text, this corpus
Oh,
of classical uh,
I wasn't dunking on you. Sorry.
myth.
So let me be clear. Like I'm talking about the
No,
fact
yeah,
I'm not yeah, I'm just saying that like I've read literary criticism like in anthologies that talk about Antigone and they
mm.
just say Antigone's right. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That's the most asinine thing I've ever seen. And it's just
No.
like
There's a bad way. There's absolutely a bad way to say that Antigone's right, and that's to put the work in a glass case and then say Sophocles intended for you to take one thing home with you, and that's that particular binary. And I'm 100% against that. You got to take her out of the glass case, and you have to fight with your rivals with this work of art, which is not a work of history. And it like that's what it's inviting one to do. It's trying to divide the audience, and to participate in that division is a way to respect the work. I think.
yeah.
So yeah, 100% with you. Like I love it when people don't like what Antigone was doing in that particular mode. you know so yeah.
Skankenstein wants us to talk more about. I don't know if we have the time, but Skankenstein says talk more about the opening of the gates, which actually plays a role. It's in the Odyssey. It is Odysseus's crime, but it's also his crowning moment. In Antigone, it is a highlighting the pretty much the because like the Greek world were these city states. The worst thing you could do was to betray your own city and let the enemy in. That's like that's like lowest circle of hell kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that Antigone's burying a brother who's basically doing just that. He's bringing a foreign mercenaries force to come in and storm the city. Is a the highest form of treason, and there
Yeah.
would be people who'd be totally fine with letting him rot. And Creon is not entirely wrong with making sure that he heals his city by making sure that treason is treated very harshly. That's
Yeah.
separate conversation. I didn't mean to drag this into Antigone. I just want to say that because the Odyssey mentions that very concept, I wanted to mention that it complicates the discourse around that play. I love seeing the intertextual kind of connection. And I've seen some criticism that is laughably simplistic and just says that Antigone's perspective is the one that's in tune with the gods, and therefore the play says she's right. And I'm like, did you listen to the chorus? So
No, yeah, yeah. Sophocles is too talented to be caught. Like what he was doing, obviously, is he identified two inviolable Greek truths that are in absolute tension with each other. And if you put them both in the same scene and invite an audience to choose between them, it creates catastrophe. And that was the whole point of of the play. Absolutely. Both are true. Uh, you should not desecrate the corpse, even of your enemies. You should allow an honorable burial for them. That's in the Iliad. It's the turning point for Achilles, and you should not open the gates to the enemy. like, like the city walls are sacred. That's also in the Iliad and the Odyssey, apparently. So it's yeah. So to put those both things like to sit them both in direct juxtaposition like that. I mean, it's a masterclass in what tragedy is and supposed to do. Sophocles, nobody did it better than Sophocles.
but yeah,
From that perspective.
but again, it's so cool to see that
Yeah.
there are these other sources from antiquity where
Mm.
there would be a conversation. There would be people who'd be like, "Nah, I'm letting him rot."
Yeah.
like like Creon's not the only one who would do that. Menelaus apparently would have, and it said that like
Mm-hmm.
people would have supported Menelaus if he had done it. So like
Some
there,
would have. Yeah. Some would have liked
sure,
that, and some wouldn't have. And
yeah,
that's really fun.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. That's the complexity. That's why I said that like it's interesting that these ancient works can hit those nuances and not just
Yeah.
even with like I said earlier with the Zinnia, it's not just about getting a Veggie Tales. I love Veggie Tales, but the Greeks were able to do things that weren't just Veggie Tales moral. Be nice to people. That's the main takeaway. Oh, great. Okay, it wasn't just be nice to strangers. Like that wasn't the only thing takeaway you're supposed to get from the Odyssey. The historical text or this version also has some complexity, which is neat. That's
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
my
It
final word on that.
thanks to Nolan for, I mean, he paid attention. I think he did do the homework, and he listened to the experts, and he did realize that um and he was inspired by, and then he voluntarily chose to adapt a story whose central theme is Xenia. He paid attention. It was not the central theme of the Odyssey. Uh, as related by people who love it enough to spend their entire lives talking about it, is not escapist adventurism. As cool as that is, and I would join you, Twitless, in watching that particular adaptation. Again, it would be an adaptation. It would not be truer to Homer to just do escapist adventurism. Um, the if there is a thematic core, it's how to be a good Xenia conversant Greek, and Nolan was inspired by that uh, to tell this post apocalypse story for Americans and for a global audience who is who suffers from America fatigue, and and to tell it to Americans who are suffering from America fatigue. So kudos to him for getting us to talk about this for almost 3 hours, which is almost the length of this film. I think it was
Yeah,
3 hours and 5 minutes. We could filibuster for another 15 about more Sophocles' tragedies. But I've taken enough of your time. I'm so grateful that we got a chance to talk about this. I knew that you'd bring some stuff. I'm particularly glad that you got to hit your main thesis about because you were anticipating that this was going to be a story. This was gonna He was gonna relate it to us by making it a superhero story, which is the way in which you need to connect with audiences. And I'm glad that you were able to explore that for us. But surprisingly, I think we found that there was so much more to talk about that even just that, and that would have been enough for a stream. And I think both of us were excited to see what he was going to do to make it relevant to us. It turns out he did a lot of things to make it super relevant to his audience, and it's being rewarded in the box office for
probably a
sure.
little, probably a little too relevant. Like I said, I don't think this is going to age great. but
Yeah, maybe too relevant. Yeah,
But it does. You
yeah,
know what? You know what? Maybe it's okay for some films to age like cheese. You needed to be there. You needed to be there for that movie. Kind of like you said with Avatar 3D. You needed to be there for that one. If you missed it, it's like missing a concert. You
yeah.
did. You can listen to the Beatles. You can't be there at their concert. You know what I mean? Like you can't be at Woodstock. You know, like that was a thing. That was an event. You were either there or you weren't. And so it's, I think it's okay that some films don't age well.
Can
It's
you
great
can you
when
imagine
it
catching
does.
this on cable television with commercial breaks?
Oh
It'd be
god.
awful. It'd be awful. Worse than a B movie. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you again for this conversation. It's been a delight, and thank you, folks, in the chat. There's been so many good content. I'm sorry, as you can tell, I've been an enormous trickster tonight, and I am just screen capping a dead yards of StreamYard because I don't want to pay $60, uh, and I ran out of StreamYard's credits for the month, so I couldn't bring up your chat, but I was watching from my phone, and Twitless was able, thankfully, to engage a little bit better than I was. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys earnestly disagreeing. I
Mhm.
appreciate you. This is the sort of thing. This is the sort of movie.
We wanted this. Yeah,
What?
this
Yeah,
film was we knew it was going to cause, everybody knew this was going to cause discourse, like
yeah.
set it on fire, and like we're here for it. That's another
Mm-hmm.
moment. We wanted to be part of the conversation. We wanted to be part of that moment where
Yeah.
everybody's talking about this movie and classical Greek literature and how they're all getting it wrong or not or whatever.
Also, it was mostly Twitless's idea. He was like, we gotta get on this moment. This is coming. We got to prepare." I didn't see it coming as much as he did. Uh, so if you didn't like this experience, you can blame Twitless. But
Mea
he
culpa.
he had the foresight. Uh, he saw this coming, so his eyes were sharpened by the gods. He knew that this was going to be drama. So yeah. Well, thank you again, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Twitless. This has been a great live stream. We're going to do more of these in the near future.